All right. I'm ready. You ready, Eric? All right.
Ready on your right, ready on your left, ready in the center. Downrange is no longer clear.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Ask a Gettysburg Guide. Today we are talking about the Wheatfield, a very, 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 very confusing part of the battle that needs some clarification, and we're going to try our damnedest to bring that to you today. But God only knows if we'll survive, if we'll succeed and do that. Our guest today is Lewis Trott. Hello, Lewis.
Hello. Nice
How
to be
are you?
here.
It's good to have you. We haven't had you on in a while.
Yeah,
for
but I've been busy with the Get Out of the Car tour, so once that's over, it gives me a little more time.
And now you're busy coming up with the schedule for next year.
Yeah,
right?
I'm close. I got like 2 more tours.
Give us a couple. Just give us 2 that we're doing, that we know we're doing.
I'm thinking about Kershaw's Advance, which plays into what we're going to talk about today.
Nice.
And what was the other one we discussed?
East Cemetery Hill.
East Cemetery Hill, yep.
And more. So,
at least 4 more.
Yes. Yeah, we're not doing one in July next year because July always is low attendance. Not low attendance, but compared to the other ones, it's low and hot as hell. And I think everybody goes on vacation to the beach in July. They don't come here per se. Yeah. So we decided, you know what? We're exhausted at that time of year, and we're just going to not do a tour, and we'll all take a little bit of a break. So, so that's it. So there's 6 instead of 7 tours in 2022.
I think it's good if people have family vacations in July and stuff. They don't feel like they're missing anything.
Right. They don't have to feel guilty because they turned their backs on us.
That's right.
Yes, they betrayed us for their family. I mean, come on.
Families come a dime a dozen.
Speaking of family, though, we'd like to wish a happy belated birthday to one of our younger listeners, TJ Bonacci. I believe that is the pronunciation of the last name there. He turned 10 on October 27th. So we would like to say happy birthday to you, TJ. Also, even though winter is upon us, that doesn't mean there aren't things that are happening in Gettysburg for you to partake in. To keep up on that, you got to listen to our weekly live show, Addressing Gettysburg Today, which airs at 5 p.m. Eastern on Facebook every Friday and is uploaded to Patreon and YouTube early the next week. It's a lot of fun. People like it, and I don't know why. So don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Make sure you have your notifications turned on. Also, if you use the Apple Podcast app, please leave a 5-star review. Reviews, liking, sharing, subscribing are the best ways to help us grow our audience. Also, commenting also helps, and we appreciate when you do that. All right, we're talking about the Wheatfield, Lewis. A lot to unpack. We've got the Lano book in front of us.
Yes.
For those of you who are listening along or listening with the Lano book in front of you, we're starting on map 2-56, which is on page 214. And which edition is this that we have here? The revised and expanded edition? I don't know. It's 2-56, the map thing. Okay. Aside from having the Lano book, though, is there one book that you think is a good overview of the Wheatfield that you would recommend someone get?
I think the J. Jorgensen, Gettysburg's Bloody Wheatfield, is pretty good. It's only about 130 pages, so it's not a large book by any means. But I think it provides a nice overview.
So it's okay.
Of the back and forth.
So it's not getting into the weeds to confuse you. It's just going to give you a basic overview, and then you can go read other works that are a little bit more in detail after you get the overview in your head.
I think after you read that book, you should have a clearer picture what happened in the Wheatfield. And I always, when I first read that book, I did have a clearer picture. He has maps in the book.
Right.
I wish there were more maps, and that's why whenever I go back to that book, I break out the Lano maps, because his maps are much more detailed because it's an atlas.
Sure.
And that helps and provides much more clarity.
So have the Lano book with you when you're reading that book. I mean, it helps to have the Lano book with you when you're reading any book about any part of the battle, really.
Maps always help bring clarity.
I agree. Okay. So then let's get started with the story of the Wheatfield. First of all, where Where is the Wheatfield geographically related to other parts of Sickles' line?
It is the southern portion of his line. So if you're standing on Little Round Top looking west, you'll see Devil's Den down to your left front, and then pan a little bit to the right, you'll see a tree line. Directly on the other side of that tree line is the Wheatfield. You can actually see a corner of the Wheatfield from Little Round Top, but it's the southern portion of Sickles' line once he moves out.
Okay.
And it is under the control of one of his two division commanders, David Birney. Humphreys is the other division commander whose troops are up against the Emmitsburg Road. And then you get to the Peach Orchard, and that's when Sickles' line angles off towards the southeast, towards Devil's Den. And so that's the area that we're talking about. Now, that line that angles off to the southeast from the Peach Orchard is not a solid line. Sickles doesn't have enough troops to occupy that line, and that's a big problem. That's why all that artillery is brought in, lining the Wheatfield Road, is to supplement the infantry line.
Just below the, or I guess it would be just east of the Peach Orchard, where there's that gap, and all you see are artillery monuments.
Yeah, off to the left. Yeah. And when Sickles moves out there, he's told you can draw from the artillery reserve, you can draw from the 5th Corps, who's the Army of the Potomac's reserve at this point, and you can also draw from the 2nd Corps if you need to, and he's going to draw from all three.
Right.
The thing about that line is, unlike Humphreys' line facing west on the Emmitsburg Road, is a pretty solid line of infantry with some artillery put in there also. That line that's moving from the Peach Orchard down towards the area of Devil's Den is not a solid line.
Right.
The line comes down and it sort of stops at the edge of the Rose Woods, and between that edge and Devil's Den, it's unoccupied, but you have those woods there, and then you have Hobart Ward's brigade down in the Devil's Den area.
Right.
And the brigade commander that Sickles has there occupying to the right of Rose Woods towards the west is Regis de Trobriand. His brigade is there. So you have two brigades trying to maintain this line, and it's at an angle, so it's facing towards the southwest. And so when Sickles moves out, Longstreet's men come into the area. They realize they just can't come out of the woods alongside the Wheatfield Road, get out to the Emmitsburg Road, occupy either side, and drive to the northeast because there's troops out there already. They have to extend their line further to the south, and that is because of Sickles. And it's because of that movement that areas like Little Round Top, Devil's Den, and the Wheatfield come into play because they're never part of Lee's plan. And when I'm on a tour, and I give people all the information I can about Sickles, because when I first start talking about him, they're sort of astonished if they've never heard of him.
Right.
And who wouldn't be? And you know, is he crazy? And you know, did he get court-martialed for this? And I say, well, wait, let me finish, and then you make your own choice. And eventually I tell him, well, you actually got the Medal of Honor. I wish I could do stuff like that.
Right.
But the one thing his movement does cause, and whether he realizes it, I don't think he does realize it at the time it's going to do this, it forces the Confederates to adopt their attack plan. And they don't get, Lee's original plan is never put in place because Sickles moves out. And it takes all day to get in place.
Right.
But if you don't have that...
To adapt their plan.
Yeah. It forces them to change. Lee's battle plan at some point during the day becomes irrelevant because the intelligence it was based on is so old.
Right.
And it's never updated.
So they got to come up with a whole new idea.
Yeah. It's not updated until those Confederate commanders come out of the woods near the Mississippi Monument and say, look who's out in front of us now. And they've got to go further to the south. And so, but again, that's what... And I talk about this to people, especially if they've seen the movie, because if you've seen the movie, you think it's the Confederate plan all along to take Little Round Top.
Right.
Because Jeff Daniels is there. Who wouldn't want to take it?
Of course.
But I tell them, no, it's because this line has moved out. And the line is supposed to be on Little Round Top. And by the time the Confederates get into place, there's nobody there other than the signal station. So, it becomes a race to that hill. But it's never designed, let's go take that hill. The hill they want is 2 miles to the north.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the key terrain in Army parlance.
So, so then the attack begins. And again, just like Little Round Top, the Wheatfield isn't an objective. It's not a thing to them. They probably can't even see it.
No, they can't because of the woods around it. You've got Stony Hill to the west, borders the west. To the south, you have Rose Woods, and there's a stone wall. It's not a straight wall like west to east. It angles, let's say, from northeast to southwest. And then to the right, you have Hawks Ridge, which comes, it's the northern extension of the area of Devil's Den.
Right.
And then to the right of Hawks Ridge, you come down to what they call the Valley of Death, Plum Run Valley. And then, of course, from there, you go up to Little Round Top.
So you're kind of, in the way when you were saying to the right, you're going kind of southeast on the map there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
And so the Confederates begin the attack. First contact is made a little bit south of the Wheatfield, down at Devil's Den and that area.
Yeah,
there.
You have from the end of the Confederate line, you have Law's Brigade, and they're going across. They're the ones that are actually going to attack Little Round Top. Mm-hmm. To their left is Jerome Robinson's brigade. He's got the Texas Brigade with 3rd Arkansas thrown in. He has to make a choice. His instructions were to keep his left on the Emmitsburg Road, keep his right attached to Law. When Law goes further to the east, that's going to pull Robinson's brigade further to the east, so he can no longer attach his left to the Emmitsburg Road. So that pulls him further to the east. His troops end up attacking Devil's Den. Some of the Texans are going to assist in the assault on Little Round Top, but for the most part, he's attacking Devil's Den.
Right, because Robertson and Law's brigades get intermingled, right?
Yeah, because of the guns. I think it's because of the James Smith's battery up on top. Law's going to pull some Alabamians from the far right over to try and stop those guns.
Okay.
And that puts him in the middle of Robertson's line. And then you have the 4th and 5th Texas now sort of moved over and attached themselves to Law's brigade.
Right.
And that's how you have the 15th way over to the right. But the 3rd Arkansas is on the left of that line. And if they were to look to their left, when they start attacking, there's nobody there, but there's all these woods. But you get through those woods, you move north through those woods, get to that stone wall, then you come to George Rose's Wheatfield, 26 acres of wheat. So if they can bust through there, there's no troops there. So that's when Regis de Trobriand starts to adjust his line. He has 2 regiments on Stony Hill, the northern portion of Stony Hill, which is where the Wheatfield Road comes down. When you're riding the Wheatfield Road going east, eventually you'll come to a spot. When you start to enter the woods, you'll go downhill.
Yeah.
And that's where Stony Hill is. And he has 2 regiments there, the 17th Maine and the 40th New York. And he's going to pull the 17th Maine from that hill, the edge of that hill, and put them down at the southern portion of the Wheatfield along that stone wall. And then the 40th New York is going to be sent over to assist Hobart Ward's brigade. They're actually going to go into the Valley of Death and sort of plug that hole. So that's how the 17th Maine comes to be along the stone wall at the southern edge of the Wheatfield.
Okay, so they're there to basically flank the 3rd Arkansas, or whoever's in the woods.
Yeah, they're there to
just
keep that plug that little gap there.
Yeah, okay.
And while they're there, they start, of course, firing into the left side of Robinson's brigade. And so he's taking fire. He needs assistance, and he's going to look to his left for the next brigade, and that is George Tige Anderson's brigade of Georgians. So they're going to move up, and they're going to start to attack the 17th Maine along the stone wall. And that's what I'm going to call the first phase of this fight. When Anderson's Georgians come up and they engage the 17th Maine along that stone wall. Now, the 17th Maine has the stone wall for protection. There's the woods in front of them. and the 17th Maine's going to hold and be able to force Anderson's Georgians back. And that's going to end what I call the first phase.
Okay.
It's that initial attack by Anderson's men against the 17th Maine. 17th Maine holds on. Anderson's going to fall back.
So let me just recap what you've just said there to make sure I understand what you're saying, okay? So Benning is basically up against Smith's Battery and the Ward's Brigade at Devil's Den and in the woods that are just off of Devil's Den there.
That's Robertson's.
Right. What did I say?
Benning.
Sorry. I meant...
That's okay.
Yeah, the map just says Benning. So
well, Benning's...
I'm looking ahead here.
Benning's brigade is going to come in behind.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, okay. So Benning, no. That's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be at that point. I wanted to be where you just ended. So Benning then goes in where Robertson was.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then Anderson's brigade attaches to the left of Benning's brigade in the woods.
Yeah.
And then also kind of faces north with the 11th Georgia against the 17th Maine behind the wall.
Correct.
And then also the 9th and 8th Georgia against the 8th New Jersey, 5th Michigan, and 110th PA, right?
They're going to be moved down to
over
that
on
area.
Stony Hill. Okay, so
Yeah.
they're so the Georgians, the 8th and 9th Georgia, are moving towards them, but they're not engaged yet.
Yeah, as the 8th and 9th Georgia are moving into that area, the 8th New Jersey and 115th Pennsylvania are going to be sent down to that area. Now, they are not part of de Trobriand's brigade.
That was my next question. Okay.
They are part of Burling's brigade.
Burling. Okay.
Who is a brigade commander under Andrew Humphreys, the other side of Sickle's line. Humphreys has them in reserve. Since that portion of Sickle's line needs more help, they pull that brigade from Humphreys and they disperse them wherever they're needed.
Right.
It's
So
to the point where Burling doesn't have anything to do.
Right. He has got no control over anybody.
Eventually he goes back to Humphreys and, if you need me, I'm here. I don't know what he's going to do for him, but
right.
But his brigade is just piecemealed everywhere, and that's where the 8th New Jersey and 115th Pennsylvania come to the south end of Stony Hill. The difficulty there is there's nobody in control of them. Their commander of these two regiments ultimately is Burling. Mm-hmm. Burling's off, moving the 6th New Jersey over to Hobart Ward's line. Right. So there's nobody directly in control of those two regiments that they're used to being in control. And that sort of plays into a lot of the confusion that goes into this fight. Who's in control?
Yeah.
Nobody ultimately. Mm-hmm. But that's where they come from. Now, to hopefully get a visual on where we're at. If you are in the Wheatfield and you're standing near that wayside, that's the southern end of the Wheatfield.
Okay.
Along the road, there's a wayside.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Southern end of the field. You're standing there looking towards the southwest.
Uh-huh.
You can see
looking towards the Rose Farm.
Yes, looking towards the Rose Farm because that's an open area.
Yeah.
To the left, you'll see the edge of the woods. Mm-hmm. And then to the right, you'll see the southern portion of Stony Hill,
right,
which is wooded, and it's going to all block your view. You just have this little tunnel through there.
Mm-hmm.
In that area, it was very swampy. There's a creek that runs through there, Rose Run, and so the Georgians trying to attack there have problems moving through that area because it's so swampy. There's a story of one, I think he's from the 8th Georgian. He gets stuck there, and he gets shot. And he's standing up. He doesn't fall over because he's stuck in the mire.
Oh, geez.
But they talk about there were adler trees growing in that area, but that's a very hard area to attack and move through.
Right.
So that helps the Union cause. You got the stone wall that the 17th Maine's behind. To the right of that stone wall, if you're facing the south, you have this little swampy area, and then further back behind that's where you have the Stony Hill, which is an elevated plot of land, and it's also wooded.
So if you're on Stony Hill, you're looking down in men stuck in the muck and mire.
Yeah, they're having a hard time coming through there.
Yeah.
So that helps.
Okay.
The Union cause. It gives them time to get troops there. So the 17th Maine is held. The 8th New Jersey, 115th Pennsylvania is moved in, along with the 5th Michigan, 110th PA is part of Detroit Brigade. They've moved in there. Eventually, the 8th New Jersey and 115th are going to leave. They're just going to say, well, yeah, I don't know what their thinking is, but they're going to fall back towards Wheatfield Road. When they're falling back, there is one artillery unit in the Wheatfield, and that's George Winslow's Battery D, 1st New York. I think it's 1st New York. That's the only artillery in this fight directly in the Wheatfield. If you stand in the Wheatfield on either end, the northern or southern end, and if you look to the opposite way, you'll see the Wheatfield's not flat. There's a ridge that runs through that Wheatfield. I know if you're standing on Wheatfield Road, you can't see the stone wall. You can't even see the Park Service Road at the southern end because there's a ridge. So Winslow's battery is sort of up on that ridge. And these other two regiments, 8th New Jersey and 115th PA, are going to fall back past Winslow's battery. They're going to try to support them all they can, but it's not going to be much, and they're going to leave the scene. But now you have two more Union brigades are going to move into the area.
Okay.
We all know the story of Colonel Strong Vincent. He's part of General Barnes's division, the 5th Corps. They're coming into the area. Vincent's going to take his brigade and move to Little Round Top. The other two brigades that are with him, Tilton and Schweitzer, are going to be directed to Stony Hill. They're going to move down to Stony Hill. So Barnes' division, General Barnes, his division is going to be separated piecemeal also. Not quite as much as Burling's brigade, because he's keeping two brigades together, Tilton and Schweitzer. They're going to move down and occupy Stony Hill. And this begins the second portion, the second phase, I'll call it, of this fight. When his brigades move down and occupy Stony Hill, another Confederate brigade is ready to attack, and that's Joseph Kershaw and his South Carolinians. That's about 5 o'clock, somewhere in that neighborhood, time-wise. They're going to launch their assault. They're going to come across, but when Kershaw comes across the field, he has Union artillery to his left in the peach orchard. He's got to deal with that. So he's going to send some of his regiments to the left to deal with that and move forward with his other regiments. One regiment gets separated, the 15th South Carolinians. When Kershaw begins his movement across, either the 15th South Carolinians don't leave at the same time, or they get tangled up in some Confederate artillery, but they become separated from Kershaw. And later on, they're going to sort of attach themselves to another Confederate brigade.
Right.
So Kershaw's coming across. He's diverted a portion of his force on the left to deal with the Union artillery in the peach orchard. The rest of his regiments are coming, and they're going to deal with Union forces now on Stony Hill.
Okay.
When those two brigades, Tilton and Schweitzer, are moved to Stony Hill, General Barnes says to, I think it's Tilton, if you feel like you can't stay here and you need to pull out, pull out. So it's sort of under your discretion when, how long you can stay here.
Okay.
Kershaw starts to attack. Tilton gets cold feet. He says, I think it's time to go. So when he pulls out, that sort of leaves Schweitzer isolated. He's got to go too. So he is, Schweitzer's going to have to vacate Stony Hill. Now, Tilton leaves the scene. He's not a part of the story anymore when he vacates the area of the Wheatfield. But Schweitzer actually just goes north of Wheatfield Road into Trossel's Woods, and he's going to come back into the scene a little bit later on.
Okay.
So he doesn't vacate the area total. I talked about who's in control. On the Confederate side, the one guy I think that tries to gain control and work with others is Kershaw. Kershaw's coming across. He was under the understanding when his brigade starts to move, Barksdale, who's on his left, will move also north of the Wheatfield Road.
Okay.
But as his men are starting to move across the field, Kershaw says he can hear Barksdale's drums beating for assembly, meaning they haven't formed yet. The drums are bringing them to their formation. Then they'll come across. So he realizes they're not going to be on his left as they're coming across.
Okay.
What Kershaw does, though, is he looks to his right, and that's where there's going to be another Confederate brigade under the direction of Paul Semmes. He's going to say, hey, I need support from you. And that's when we're going to pull another Confederate brigade into this, and it's going to be on Kershaw's right, and it's going to be Paul Semmes.
Okay.
So everybody, we with you. You with me?
I think I'm with you so far.
I can't speak for everybody because I can't.
And
I'm not
nor
talking
can
to
I.
everybody.
I'm with you.
So Stony Hill is in dire straits now because these two brigades are pulling off it. Kershaw's coming. He's already fought with Tilton and Schweitzer, so there's been combat there. And he's starting to pull Semmes in. Now, remember earlier when I said Sickles doesn't have enough troops, Mead tells Sickles you can pull from Artillery Reserve, 5th Corps, and the 2nd Corps. This is when a division under John Caldwell from under Hancock's 2nd Corps is going to be pulled from their line and sent down to the Wheatfield. There's 4 brigades there, and they are going to be pushed into the Wheatfield. Let me back up just a little bit as this is happening. Eventually, let's go back to the 17th Maine. Eventually, because Kershaw's going to be coming towards their right, and Anderson's come back through the woods to apply more pressure to their front, the 17th Maine is going to fall back. And they're going to fall back about midway through the Wheatfield. They're going to stop, and they're going to try to deliver more infantry fire at the Confederates coming towards them, Anderson's Confederates. Now, they're running out of ammunition. They've sent to the rear to get ammunition. Ammunition's delivered, and they're using all that up. So while they're doing this, they're in front of Winslow's guns. So Winslow's having to slightly elevate his tube, the 6 guns he has there, and when he fires, that fuse is set for like a second and a half to explode right after it gets past the 17th Maine's troops, so you don't have friendly fire and stuff. But unlike the other regiments that are just leaving, I think the 17th Maine is the one that does justice to the cause, if that makes sense.
Okay.
They are forced back because they're taking fire from their right. Once the 8th New Jersey and the 115th PA leave, they're having to refuse their right.
Right.
In other words, form their line in sort of an L shape because of fire coming from the right. But once they're forced off that wall, they don't just leave. They stop midway through the Wheatfield, and they try their best to deliver fire and slow down the Confederates. Anderson's Georgians are actually going to get into the Wheatfield. And so it's gone from this fight around the periphery to actually in the Wheatfield because Anderson's pushed the 17th Maine off of the wall and is pushing them back. They're not going to stay there because now you have, like I mentioned earlier, you have Caldwell's division coming down from the 2nd Corps line. When Caldwell's division comes down, he sends, there's 3 brigades that are going to go into the field. You have Edward Cross is going to be on the left. You have the Irish Brigade on the right, and behind the Irish Brigade, you have Zook's Brigade, Samuel Zook. Those 2 brigades, the Irish Brigade under Patrick Kelly and Samuel Zook, they're going to be going into the area of the Stony Hill. Edward Cross's brigade is going to be partly in the woods, into Rosewoods is on the left, and then partly out into the Wheatfield. So part of his, the 5th New Hampshire and 148th Pennsylvania on the right of the 5th New Hampshire, part of them are going to be sheltered by the woods, but the rest of them are going to be out in the open. They push into the woods, and they've pushed Anderson back at this point. But now you have Caldwell's 4th Brigade, John Brooke, and this is the brigade that's going to go further than any other Union brigade. They're going to sweep down through the middle of the Wheatfield. They're going to go past the stone wall, go past Rose Creek, in those Rose Woods. And if you ever go into those woods, there's a little ridge. They're going to come up to that ridge, and today it's modern day Brook Avenue back there. And if you travel back along Brook Avenue, you'll see the monuments to each of his regiments within that brigade. They're going to push further than any other brigade does. Mm-hmm. Because of this, they push past their support.
Right.
So they're going to become flanked on either side and surrounded, and that's going to force them to fall back. By now you have Kershaw, you have Semmes on Kershaw's right, you have Anderson's men, and you have a couple regiments from Benning's brigade all in this fight.
Yeah.
But now we have the final brigade of Confederates that are going to be enter the fray, and this is what's going to make the Second Corps' position down in the Wheatfield untenable, and that's Wofford's brigade.
Okay.
Wofford is coming behind Barksdale. When Barksdale attacks, most of his force is going to come east, and then they're going to turn to the northeast because he's the one guy that adheres to Lee's original plan. He's
Right.
hugging to the Emmitsburg Road,
Right.
other than the 21st Mississippi that keeps going east.
Okay.
But Wofford, instead of following him, he decides to go due east, and he's going to come down the Wheatfield Road in that direction. When he does this, nobody's stopping him. And he is coming down, and it gets to a point where he's going to be behind the Union line in the Wheatfield. Brooke has already outpaced the rest of his support on either side. Brooke's going to have to fall back, and these other Cross's brigade, Catrick Kelly's Irish Brigade, and Zook's Brigade, they're all going to have to fall back because as Wofford's coming down, Kershaw gets more momentum again. He starts to attack along with, again, Semmes on his right. And now the Confederates have the most momentum and the most men that they've had in this fight. And this is where they're going to start to push all these Union forces back towards the east. As they're doing this, Union commanders see what's happening, and this is when they're going to bring up more Union forces, and this is going to be the regulars. Regulars are going to sweep into the Wheatfield, east to west, but as they come, they swing. And they swing towards the southwest. They're going to swing like a door. Yeah. Jeff Daniels is going to leave Little Round Top to lead the regulars.
Yeah,
they cut that because it would have been a 5-hour movie.
Yeah.
So when they swing that way, though, we got Wofford coming down, Kershaw, pushing Union troops off of Stony Hill. That's going to open up the right flank of these regulars, and they're not going to be able to stay there very long at all. And that's going to push them back. And that's when there's somebody up on Little Round Top that sees this display. They're not panicking. They turn around and they, in military order, extricate themselves from the Wheatfield. And that's where somebody says, for 2 years, they've taught us how to die, or excuse me, how to fight like soldiers. And this is the occasion they're teaching us how to die like soldiers.
So let's just back up a little bit.
That is a lot.
In case everybody just lost, and their eyes went crossed from listening to all that. All right, so
Eric, wake up now.
You introduced, and you're unmuted, Eric, if you want to join us. You introduced Barksdale. Well, you introduced Barksdale and Wofford. You said Wofford was behind Barksdale. So Hood and McLaws, they're lined up in the woods there on, I guess that would be Warfield's Ridge.
Yep.
Right. And their attacks are layered, right? They have one brigade behind another.
Yes.
So what was it? Law?
You've got Law, Robertson. Behind them, you have Benning and Semmes.
Right. So Law.
Or excuse me, Anderson.
So you have Law, and then north of him would be Anderson. I'm sorry, Robertson. And then go back to Law, go behind him. And we have who?
Benning.
And then above him, we would have Anderson. So that's Hood's division.
Yes.
And then McLaws's is arrayed in a similar fashion.
Yeah, attack in depth.
Right. North of, who, I always forget this, Robertson.
Yeah.
No.
You have Kershaw.
Yes. And so north of Robertson, you have Kershaw.
Behind him would be Semmes.
Behind him is Semmes. North of him is Barksdale.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
North of Anderson is Barksdale. I'm sorry, Kershaw.
North of Kershaw is Barksdale.
I'm confusing everybody
and
more.
The Wheatfield Road splits those two
Yeah.
brigades. You got Kershaw south of the road, Barksdale north of the road. Behind those two,
right,
south of the road, you have Semmes. North of the road, you have Wofford.
That's a better way to put it. Okay. I was trying to do that from memory, not from looking at a map. So
it's hard. There's a lot of names.
It's easier than I just made it sound there. It's not that hard, but
57.
There's only 8. That's not even 2 whole hands of fingers.
I know.
Unless you're missing a hand.
That's fair.
Then it's more than you got.
We'll go with average.
So, all right. So now Barksdale goes ahead of Wofford.
Yep.
And like you said, Barksdale hugs the Emmitsburg Road and cuts northeast.
Yeah.
Except for the 21st Mississippi, which keeps going straight ahead down basically the Wheatfield Road. And then Wofford goes behind them.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yes.
And I guess they would come up over Stony Hill and then down into the Wheatfield.
Yep. And towards the Valley of Death, northern portion of that valley.
Right.
There's the Weichert Farm on their left. You got a Union battery over the Walcott's battery on the left, that farm. Jacob Weichert? Yeah. Yeah, because George is further up the road.
John is the one that's down there by the Valley of Death.
John, yeah. That was a J.
Whatever, they're all Weicherts.
Yeah.
They're all Weicherts.
Yeah, crazy Weicherts.
Careful, there's still Weicherts alive.
Oh, no.
Careful what you say about Weicherts.
I love some Weicherts.
I don't pay my mortgage to them. That's for sure.
All right, so now when Barksdale and Wofford are going ahead, they're first encountering Humphrey's division along the Emmitsburg Road. They've got to clear them out of the way before they even get to the Wheatfield.
Barksdale, yes.
Yeah.
But by the time Wofford comes through there, they're gone.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, there's a story where Longstreet is with Barksdale. Barksdale's itching to go in, and Longstreet says, just wait a minute. We're all going in shortly. This is, so a lot of people like to do what if, and the famous one, of course, is Jackson, but that's a silly one. This is a better one, I think.
Okay.
What if Kershaw attacks and Barksdale goes in at the same time? Kershaw doesn't necessarily have to divert these regiments to take care of the artillery in the peach orchard because Barksdale's coming in at them.
Right.
And if everything falls the way it does, it falls faster.
Yeah.
And they push through there faster. I'm not saying it's going to change the ultimate outcome.
No.
But the story's going to be a lot different for sure.
Sure.
And it's always interests me because Kershaw, when he writes afterwards, he expects Barksdale to come in on his left with him. But as he's leaving, he says he hears the drums calling the troops to assembly. And they're not even ready to charge yet. So, eventually when he's coming across that field, Kershaw has to divert some regiments towards that artillery instead of everybody going straight towards Stony Hill.
Right. All right, so now let's go back then to when Wofford comes in and goes through the Wheatfield. Let's break that down. But by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you are following along in the Leno book, it's map number 2-101, page 249.
Yeah, I've gotten way behind in my map stuff.
It's okay. But yeah, so Wofford is just, in that map, he's just crossed the Emmitsburg Road, and he's about to move on in. So, okay, so go ahead. He moves on in. It's basically, he's able to get there unobstructed, right? There's no one in front of him.
Yeah, there's nothing blocking his way.
The Bigelow's battery is out in the field there, but it looks like they're being taken care of.
No, they've moved north of Wheatfield Road by now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're leaving too. I should say this. I pulled Tilton and Schweitzer off of Stony Hill. Before Wofford comes down, they're going to get Schweitzer to actually come back into the Wheatfield. And that's when you're going to have the 4th Michigan move down to where their monument is today. And it's down near that stone wall. Because originally they're on Stony Hill, but their monument is over here just south of the Park Service Road there.
Right.
Because Schweitzer doesn't leave the area totally like Tilton does. Schweitzer's called back in, and he's got 3 regiments. One regiment's off doing provost duty somewhere. But one of those regiments is the 4th Michigan, and that's when you have the famous episode of Colonel Harrison Jeffords defending their flag that they were given. He went home on leave before this battle. The people of his hometown in Michigan might have been the governor too, give him this brand new flag, and he says he's going to defend this with his life, and that's what he ends up doing. He's bayoneted to death by Confederates trying to take this flag in intense hand-to-hand fighting. So this is before Wofford comes down. It's way out of order now. But I wanted to make sure I included that because that's sort of a famous episode. But eventually, like I said, the pressure is going to be too great, and they're going to get just pushed out of there.
So, who is it that Wofford first encounters when he gets Union makes contact with the Union line?
Probably Caldwell's portions of Caldwell's division,
like Kelly and Zook.
Yeah,
as they're retreating, basically.
Yeah, they're coming off Stony Hill. That's the pressure that's going to push them off Stony Hill.
Okay,
and then you have the regulars are there. They're trying to keep this line from just disintegrating. And so they're going to be able to fire into the right flank of the regulars as they're sweeping, swinging across the field.
So the regulars are under Day. Is that Day's brigade?
That is Burbank. Day is back there. It's Hannibal, Burbank, and Day are the two brigade commanders under the Roman Ayres division.
Okay.
And they're lined up back near Hawks Ridge. And Hannibal's, not Hannibal, Sidney Burbank's, I believe it's his a brigade of regulars that sweep through there.
Okay. No.
Do I have it backwards?
Burbank. Okay, sweeping through. Yeah. I'm sorry.
They're both back there, but only one line goes.
Gotcha. Okay, so they kind of this basically stops the assault through the Wheatfield, or do they knock the regulars out and continue along?
And let me just say, back to the regulars coming through there, good map is on page 255, 2-108, and 2-109. Burbank's brigade enters the Wheatfield, and that shows you how Caldwell's been pushed back, Wofford's coming down, and it looks, especially on the right side of Burbank's line, like they're surrounded.
Yeah, I mean, the Confederate line is kind of coming all together.
Yeah, it's coming.
And the Union line is getting pretty small.
Yes.
And it looks like they're being enveloped.
Yes. And then, let's see. I mean, they're going to, so the regulars are going to fall out of the Wheatfield. They're going to go back. And that's going to allow, let me find the right map, the Confederates to really go towards the Valley of Death. And
that would be, let's see.
265. Here. They're pushing them back.
65.
And they're going to get up. They're going to occupy Hawks Ridge.
Yeah. Okay, there, yeah. Right. And then that's it? They hold the Wheatfield then for the rest of the battle?
Oh, no.
Oh, what happens?
No. This is when we have our final Union push to push the Confederates out of this area, and this is going to be the Pennsylvania Reserves.
Ah.
Yes.
Oh, man.
Eric's boys.
The reserves.
Should I turn it over to you, Eric?
No. Carry on.
Seem excited. So, and this is where you have more famous episodes. So, these reserves are under McCandless, and they are going to be sent down. They're the ones that are going to push Kershaw, Semmes, and Anderson. I don't list Wofford because Longstreet is going to pull Wofford back. I think he gets pushed back anyways, but the way events work out, Longstreet is the one that sends word to Wofford to, all right, this is as far as I think you're going to get.
Right.
Let's pull back. And they're bitter about it because they think, oh, what force in front has been able to slow them down? They're just a juggernaut coming through there, and they think they can keep on going.
Right.
The problem is Kershaw, Semmes, and Anderson have been fighting for a couple hours now. They're wore out, and they've taken heavy casualties. So, and there's more Union forces that haven't been engaged flooding into the area.
So Wofford could keep going. The problem is he's going to hit a wall.
He's going to end up like the other Confederate brigade. So, in hindsight, I think it's the right call.
Sure.
Longstreet has an appreciation of the bigger picture at this point. So he pulls them back. But when the reserves get sent back through there, they're a fresh, as far as being in combat on this day, they're a fresh brigade, and they're going to be sent down through there, and they're going to be able to push the Confederates back to Stony Hill, and then the reserves are going to set up along Hawks Ridge. So that, at the end of the day, the middle of the wheat field, where the actual wheat was growing, is sort of a no man's land, but it's filled with thousands of dead, dying, and wounded men. And it was said that you could walk from one end of the field to the other without touching the ground. You're walking on the backs of men.
They loved using that. Was that an analogy
really
or a
do.
metaphor? Whatever it is. It's a metaphor, I think.
I keep wanting to say alliteration, but I don't think that's
No,
correct.
alliteration's like big, bad,
Yeah.
blue
Yeah.
bird.
We clearly all skipped
That's fair.
English class.
Yeah. Well, whatever
Or
it is.
literature class.
You hear that a lot, but I mean, it
And you
does
know, I
paint
know
a good
words
picture.
Say
I
it.
do know words good.
Yeah.
but
He just doesn't know how to
apparently
speak
not
them.
That's fine.
No, but it is a very vivid picture that paints, to give you an idea of what it might have looked like, or just how many wounded were there. I know there's this question that's coming up after the break from one of our listeners, but I want to actually no, I'm not going to steal it, because I thought for a second I thought it was 6 questions Lentz's question, and I didn't mind
You
stealing
mean
10
10 questions, Lentz?
He has 10 questions today.
Indeed.
I didn't mind stealing one from him, but it wasn't. It was the only question from someone else, so I'm not going to steal it. I'll just wait until we get there. But all right, so have we closed up the wheat field, or is there more?
I think so.
And we're done.
And I hope I haven't confused things. I'm not the smartest guy in the world.
Depends. Hey, are we talking about the third day at all or no?
Do you want to get into the third day? I think
No.
we're really what we were
Fair enough.
focusing on is the second
Second
day here.
That's fine.
But which we can just do that another day.
I would like
the
to
third
make
day.
one more point.
Go ahead.
And it goes back to, for those that were on the Get Out of the Car tour, this
Yeah.
is the difference between that attack we talked to about last month, a couple weeks ago, and this attack, and you explained it. Longstreet's corps attacks in depth.
Yes.
Longstreet is very active.
Right.
Move up the line, that's where things fall apart, because AP Hill is clearly not active. They're not attacking in depth, although portions of that corps had already been used on the first day, so they're not all fresh. Walking 26 miles doesn't make you fresh either. But that is the big difference, and I always think this is the Confederates' chance to have a different outcome at Gettysburg. It's on the second day, and if they can replicate what they've done at the southern end of the field, because look what they're doing. They've pulled, the 5th Corps is being piecemealed down here. They're being pulled apart. They've pulled a section of Hancock's line away. They've pulled most of the troops, although they don't end up down here, but they've pulled most of the troops off Culp's Hill.
Yeah.
Sent them over here. A couple, a bunch of
Yeah.
them get lost.
Yeah.
Down playing putt-putt or something.
Right.
And
Want to go shopping?
but if they can continue this up the line, there are weak spots along the line. And when Ambrose Wright comes up there and he says, I'm not supported on either side, definitely on the left he's not supported, but on the right, Lang's brigade and then who's next one? Wilcox's brigade, they have their own fight at hand. But on the left, he's definitely not supported. If there are troops coming behind them, like the Confederates have on the
Right.
southern end of the field, maybe they do have enough momentum.
In other words, if AP Hill had his attack in depth like Longstreet did,
I think
there might have
could
been
have made a
something more.
difference.
Yeah.
Because the way they do it, the Union line only has to hold on against this one main attack from the Confederates,
Right.
rather than a subsequent attack coming from behind them.
Right.
And that makes a big difference.
Sure. But it didn't happen, and the Confederates lost the Battle of Gettysburg, and indeed the war.
They did.
And no matter how many what-ifs we play with, they still can't win because it just didn't
Yeah.
happen.
But I like the tactical what ifs rather than
Yeah.
if Person X was here.
Right.
I mean, who cares?
Yeah, I know. If
but the
General
tactical
Patton was at Gettysburg.
is great. Uncle was.
Yeah, but what if General Patton was at Gettysburg with one tank?
He'd have slapped some soldier and got in trouble.
No,
Actually, back then he wouldn't have got in trouble. No.
Yeah,
Edward Cross liked to slap people with his sword.
The softening of Americans hadn't started in the Civil War. That was a 20th century thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do this. Let's take a break now, and then we'll come back and we're going to answer these questions. We have a lot of questions. Even if you take out 6 questions is 10 questions, you still have a lot of questions to answer. So we'll take a break and we'll be right back. Well, the 2021 season is over, but that doesn't mean you can't get a jump on next season. In fact, Getty's Bike Tours will reward those who do so with a 15% discount. All you got to do is book a tour for 2 people or more between now and March 31st of 2022, and you'll receive 15% off your tour. So call 717-752-7752 and book today. Discount only applies to tours. Experience the magic of Christmas in Gettysburg. Stroll decorated streets on a festive walking food tour highlighting the sights, sounds, and unique tastes of this historic town. Enjoy stops at some of the best eateries, all while learning fascinating facts about early Christmas traditions. Admire the glittering lights, decorated storefronts, and our grand 30-foot Christmas tree in Lincoln Square, all adding to the ambiance of the most wonderful time of the year. Get started on Christmas shopping for your loved ones as we visit a few downtown stores that offer one-of-a-kind Christmas gifts. A perfect opportunity for any last-minute gift hunting you need to get done. Enjoy a private holiday tour through the Shriver House with dessert in the Shriver Saloon. This special tour will transport you back in time to Christmases of yesteryear. So make a new Christmas tradition with your family and friends. The Christmas Tastes and Traditions food tour promises to be delicious, delightful, and decidedly local. Go to SavorGettysburgFoodTours.com and book your tour today. That's SavorGettysburgFoodTours.com. Our favorite bookstore in Gettysburg is For the Historian, located at 42 York Street. Isn't it, Eric?
You're darn tootin', Matt.
It's because they have the best selection of Civil War books in Gettysburg, both new and used, and online they have even more books to choose from.
But Matthew, what if the Civil War is simply not my thing?
Not a problem, my fine four-fendered friend. This is For the Historian, after all. They cover history from the ancient world to the 21st century with a strong selection of World War II and American Revolution books.
It's astounding how they squeeze thousands of titles from Osprey, Savas Beatty, UNC Press, and more into their store.
And it's also astounding how you and I both squeeze into our pants every day. Well, handsome, they have a warehouse too, and that's where they keep all those books that are available online at forthehistorian.com. And folks, if you go to forthehistorian.com now and order books until you're blue in the face, be sure you mention that you heard about them on Addressing Gettysburg in the Note to Seller box, and they will refund your shipping costs.
What if I prefer to browse in the store and don't want to go online to get my book?
Great question, Doodlebug. Just mention Addressing Gettysburg at checkout, and they'll take 20% off the retail price of your item. So go to forthehistorian.com, stop by 42 York Street, or call 717-685-5207. That's forthehistorian.com or 717-685-5207.
Need a Corps badge or other insignia for your uniform? Then check out the Badge Maker. Here's what some of his satisfied customers had to say. Miranda said, "I ordered an identification disc from Joe and it's fantastic. He hand stamped it exactly as I wanted. It has a great rough on-campaign feel to it and was reasonably priced to boot." Greg said, "My unit has purchased from him in the past. Quality badges and good service." And Jerry S. says, "The Badge Maker is the go-to place for accurate replica Civil War badges. Visit CivilWarCorpsBadges.com and attach a message with your order saying you heard about him on Addressing Gettysburg."
Audiobook narrator Mike Scott. When selecting your next audiobook, choose from some of the great titles narrated by audiobook narrator Mike Scott, like Bloody Autumn, the Shenandoah Valley Campaign of 1864. If you're an author or publisher interested in having your written works produced as audiobooks, give Mike a shout at MikeScottVoice.com. Mike Scott, the voice of history. And Civil War Trails. It's the world's largest open-air museum, and they offer over 1,300 sites across 6 states. Drive the Gettysburg campaign turn by turn, paddle to Frederick Douglass's birthplace, or hike to remote earthworks and artillery positions. Visit civilwartrails.org to request a brochure and explore their interactive map. Follow Civil War Trails and create some history of your own.
Are you planning on spending some time in Gettysburg soon? Well, you should, so check out GettysburgBattlefieldTours.com as your source for things to do. Tickets are available for exclusive experiences such as the Sunset Double-Decker Battlefield Tour, Adams County Port Tour Shuttle, and Discoveries Beyond Gettysburg. For details, follow them on Facebook or visit GettysburgBattlefieldTours.com.
Gettysburg, A Nation Divided mobile app is relaunching this summer. Gettysburg, A Nation Divided is an award-winning mixed reality mobile application using augmented reality technology. It transports users into the most crucial moments in the Battle of Gettysburg, the turning point of the Civil War. Users can listen and watch historic figures share their stories as lifelike animated avatars, traverse 360-degree image sequences of the battlefield. Its cinematic battle sequences are narrated by actor Scott Eastwood. The mobile app is available for free on iOS and Android. It's designed to be used anywhere, at home, at school, at the park, or at Gettysburg National Military Park. It uses GPS to help guide you through your journey to see the stories and events unfold at the exact location where they occurred. So go into your phone's app store and get it now for free. That's Gettysburg, A Nation Divided.
What's up, everybody? It's Pat McGuire, co-host of the History Things podcast. Co-host Matt Borders and I offer a fresh new podcast taking on some of the most famous, as well as some of the most unheard of stories from U.S. and world history. Always conversational and approachable, we take the deep dives that you want into history, as well as exploring the rabbit holes that you didn't even ask us to. New episodes every quarter with follow-up episodes roughly 30 to 40 days afterwards. Download the History Things podcast on most major podcast apps, including Apple Podcast, Google Play, Spotify, and by asking your Amazon Alexa smart device to play the History Things podcast. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the History Things podcast. As always, thanks for listening. Now back to the show.
And we're back with Louis Trott to answer some of the questions that our patrons sent in over at patreon.com/addressing Gettysburg. But, you know, during the break, Bob Steenstra stopped by to say hi, and we got to talking with him. And he brought up an account that is a pretty good one that takes place on the night, I believe, of the 2nd, when everybody's just kind of laying there. And the Wheatfield is basically a no man's land full of, as you pointed out before, wounded and dead. And this is a Lieutenant Inman from the 118th Pennsylvania. He says this: that night, a number of stray hogs came to where I lay and commenced rooting and tearing at the dead men around me. Finally, one fellow in that darkness looked of enormous size, approached and attempted to poke me, grunting loudly the while. Several others also came up. When waiting my chance, I jammed my sword into his belly, which made him set up a prolonged sharp cry. By constant vigilance and keeping from sleeping, I contrived to fight the monsters off till daylight. So, even though the battle's over, and you may be laying there helplessly wounded in the field, you're not getting any rest because there are wild hogs, not wild hogs, but hogs that have been released from, I believe, the Rose Farm, rooting around the dead and wounded and trying to eat them. So that is not fun. But what is fun is getting to the questions from our patrons. And so we're going to start off with a veteran questioner. 6 questions lengths. Now, as we pointed out before, 6 questions has about 10 questions today, and we're going to see which ones we're actually going to ask here, because we might have covered some of them before or something like that. He says, thank you for doing an Ask a Guide about the Wheatfield. Personally, it is always a fight I come back to in my studies. Something about that location keeps drawing me back. The more I know about it, the less I understand. Question number 1.
That's the wrong way to go.
Yeah, right.
He's doing something wrong.
Number 1, our understanding of the fight at the Wheatfield seems to come predominantly from Union sources, as Confederate sources are limited to non-existent. As such, Do you know of any good sources that help to explain the fighting of G.T. Anderson's and Paul Semmes's brigades?
Well, Semmes dies, so he's not going to write anything. Anderson's wounded, and then he shows back up later in the war. So, and he doesn't really write anything. It's not those two brigades, but Joseph Kershaw writes an essay for what became Battles and Leaders, and it's about this fight. Other than to my knowledge, other than what you can get in, like from the book I mentioned earlier by J. Jorgensen,
right,
or those sections of DeFont's Gettysburg Second Day book that will give you Confederate accounts. The problem, I find the same problem that Mike finds. It's hard to get those accounts, and inevitably what I have to go to is publications like Confederate Veteran, or go through old newspaper accounts where they would write literal, long articles about their fight. That's where I get most of my Confederate perspective from. They just didn't, they had their hands full after the war because they lost, and they
had a lot of stuff to burn,
and they're bitter and stuff. So they're not writing a lot of regimental histories like Union soldiers did.
Right.
So it is harder.
So basically, it's not that they're not there. It's just that you've got to look.
You've got to
far
sort
and
of
wide.
piecemeal things together.
Yeah.
Now, somebody smart like Gary Edelman or Tim Smith probably, if there's something out there, an account, a larger account dealing with those two particular brigades, they probably know it, and I just haven't come across it yet. But like I said, Paul Semmes dies, so he's definitely not writing anything.
Yeah.
And I could, there's members of the different regiments under these two brigades that write stories, and a lot of times they'll write these big narratives, and they appear in their local newspaper, and they might be serialized. And so then if you can go find those newspaper accounts where they have serialized it, meaning, part one in this issue, part two in subsequent issues and stuff, you can get stuff that way. But it's just, you have to work harder to get Confederate accounts, lengthy Confederate accounts versus what you can find for the Union side.
All right. He also wants to know, what role did leadership have in the conduct of the fight? How much influence did division commanders have on the fighting? How much influence, if any, did corps commanders have?
Corps commanders, no influence other than sending troops down there. Hancock's going to send Caldwell down there. Caldwell's the one who tries to, on the Union side, he is the one division commander that tries to coordinate things. But, the fight's already started when he moves his division down there. And that's when he's up on the slopes of Little Round Top in that area, where he sees an aide says to him, "Your men are falling back." No, they're being relieved. And, it's sort of a funny little quip that, no, I think they're running away. And then the regulars sweep down through there. But he seems to be trying to bring order to the fight and coordinate with more troops down there. On the Confederate side, like I mentioned earlier, as far as I can see, Kershaw is the only one that tries to coordinate with the other commanders. Having said that, Semmes or Anderson goes, and when Kershaw comes across, I mentioned that the 15th South Carolina gets detached for a variety of reasons from Kershaw's main line. Anderson goes out and he's trying to coordinate with the commander of the 15th South Carolina. When he does that, he gets wounded. So Anderson's taken out. Semmes is going to be mortally wounded. He's taken out. So a lot of these commanders that would try to exercise control are being wounded and taken and removed from the field. On the Union side, Cross is out. Zook gets wounded. Brooke gets wounded, although that's when they begin the retreat. So, they're there together, though, so it's a less of a problem as far as coordination. But on the Union side, I think Caldwell, and on the Confederate side, I think Kershaw. But definitely nothing above that. Barnes' division comes in there, and like I mentioned earlier, it gets piecemealed everywhere.
Right.
So, he's sort of like...
It's really a mess.
Yeah, he's, to a lesser extent, he's like Burling. What do I got to do now? Everybody's gone. So,
Right. All All right. So when Samuel Zook pulled his brigade out of line on the request of General Sickles, did he inform Caldwell of the move? If not, was that a violation of the chain of command? What impact did that decision have on fighting that evening?
You know, if you think about that, what's the difference between that and what Strong Vincent does? An aide comes up to him, hey, we need troops. And he, on his own volition, takes his brigade out of line and puts them on a little round top. That things turn out great. He becomes a hero. Zook is pulled by Sickles, and hey, who's been told you can draw from the Second Corps, and that's why this division's coming down there. Sickles tells Zook, we need you over here. Can you go over here? And he says yes. But Zook makes an attempt to go tell Caldwell. I don't know if he ever reaches Caldwell and says, this is what I'm doing. But he winds up in the same area anyways.
But Sickles has permission to pull from the Second Corps, right?
Yeah, but normally he would go to that division commander rather than straight down. But this time is of the essence in this instance.
Right, but his permission is from Mead.
Yeah.
So Mead, wouldn't he have informed Hancock, and then Caldwell would be informed by Hancock that...
Oh, yeah, that's why he gets sent in the first place.
Right.
Yeah.
So does Sickles need to go through all that chain of command if he's been given permission to pull from that unit?
No, but I think his question is more to Zook. Zook is taking commands from this other guy, Sickles, rather than going through his chain of command. And
correct, but what I'm saying is Zook wouldn't have to do that, because Caldwell would know that Sickles has the right to pull from his division.
So ultimately, it's not a big thing. And Zook ends up where I think he's supposed to be anyways. He's on the northern portion of Stony Hill, and he gets wounded early on.
Okay.
So there's a marker there.
All right. We're only 1/64th of the way through his questions here. So
1/64th sent.
Here we go. What impact did Wofford's Georgia Brigade have on the outcome of the fight at the Wheatfield? Why did he proceed down the Wheatfield Road rather than follow Barksdale's brigade? After taking the Wheatfield, did Wofford want to continue the attack? If so, what prevented him from doing it? So we got into this pretty good. We're gonna skip that one there. Sorry, Mike. Is it true that Paul Semmes carried a tourniquet with him? If so, why?
He did carry a tourniquet, but he had done this throughout the war. It's probably a practical reason. He might need it.
If I could get my hands on a tourniquet, I would have carried one.
Yeah, today you carry medical stuff on your person.
Right. He was ahead of his time.
He was.
Why is that so weird? Why would Mike be asking that question if...
Well, he gets wounded in his leg, and he applies his own tourniquet to his leg after being wounded in the Wheatfield.
And it helps save his life, right?
Well, no. It prolongs his life.
Oh, okay.
It prolongs his life.
Right.
He dies a couple weeks later. What he did, though, before this battle, his life insurance was up, the premium or the policy. So he wrote home to have somebody renew the policy. And when he writes home, he says, I don't have a premonition of death. I'm not afraid of death. But this is pretty practical. I might die, So he does that. But, when he dies, he writes and tells, I think he either writes to somebody or tells the woman's house he's staying in, I was proud to die for my nation, the Confederacy. So he has no regrets, it doesn't seem. But it's just... The tourniquet's a practical thing. Not everybody does it, so I think it's highlighted more with Paul Semmes, and he applies it to himself. It ends up coming in handy. Like I said, it prolongs his life for a couple weeks. So,
he's not even 10 questions, Lance, because each one of these questions has like four or five questions in them. So he's more like 80 questions, Lance. Who is Edward Cross? What did he do before the war? Why did he always wear a bandana in battle? Where was he mortally wounded, and who avenged him? What happened to Sergeant Phelps?
Avenge me.
I don't know, Mike.
I'm assuming
Sorry, Mike.
I think he gave the answer.
I'm guessing, that's my guess.
Why do you want to know about Sergeant Phelps?
He's not here to answer us.
Oh, because he avenges him.
Yeah.
He answered his own question. What are you doing, Mike? So Edward Cross, previously to this battle, was the commander of the 5th New Hampshire, and he gets moved up to brigade command. Before the war, he was a journalist. He moved out to Cincinnati to be a reporter of some sort. Eventually goes out west into the Arizona territories. at one point it's written that he was a scout for the Army and stuff. There's a biography out there. I forget the author's name. It's like Staunton or something. But he says he was an alcoholic. He liked ladies. And so he wasn't the most upstanding person, according to this biographer. But here at Gettysburg, he was a brigade commander under Caldwell. And he's not that liked. He's fairly harsh. It didn't take much for him to slap somebody with the flat of his sword. Coming up here to Gettysburg, he relieves the 148th of their commander, Colonel McFarland, and he takes the commander of the 81st Pennsylvania, Boyd McKean, I believe is his name, puts him in charge. And they don't know who this guy is right before the battle. And so he's not very well liked. He does things that, and if you read the history, the regimental history and the dedication of the 148th Monument in the Wheatfield, that person talks about this, relieving them of their commander, and they don't understand why. So there's a problem. You at least want to know this is why. He does get irritated when they're crossing one of the rivers or creeks coming up here. He tells them, get across the creek, but there's a little bridge going across the creek, so they whittled it down to single file to get across there, and it's taking too long. He gets annoyed. He says, no, get out there and just get across it. Of course, they're getting their feet all wet, and soldiers don't like wet feet. So he's not exactly liked. He wears the bandana. Previously to this battle, he would wear a red bandana around his head. That's so he could be seen in the thick of the battle. It makes him more identifiable in the confusion and smoke of a fight. Here at Gettysburg, famously, he switches out the red bandana for a black bandana.
Right.
Puts it on. He has a conversation with Hancock. Hancock says, this day will bring you a star. And he says, no, General, this is going to be my last fight. That could have different meanings. He's down in the Wheatfield in the area of where the 5th New Hampshire's monument is. If you're standing down there and you look to the, let's see, you're facing sort of the southwest. You look to the left of that, there's a smaller marker there. It just looks like a marker. It's got little cuts in the top of it. That's the original marker that was over there. It said that he was wounded there. But he's in the neighborhood of where the current 5th New Hampshire's monument is. Across the road, there's a large rock. There was a man, I believe he's from the 20th Georgia, and it's written in their official report. A soldier pops up and shoots Cross and kills Cross. Well, he mortally wounds him. He's going to die the next day. Sergeant Charles Phelps sees this. He knows where the shot came from, so he's biding his time, waiting for this guy to pop up again. Eventually, that the fellow that killed Cross pops up again, and Sergeant Phelps kills him. He avenges their commander.
Okay.
When the withdrawal begins, and the 5th New Hampshire is in the woods, so they're protected. A portion on the 5th New Hampshire's right is the 148th Pennsylvania. So they're partly in the woods and partly in the field. That part in the woods, like the left 3 companies, hang out with the 5th New Hampshire. They were one of the last ones to leave when Brooks starts to fall back because they have cover in the woods. So when Sergeant Phelps is falling back, he gets shot, and he's shot in the back. You don't want to get shot in the back.
No.
It takes away from the good death.
Yes.
So, but everybody's falling back, and it doesn't mean that they're running away. It's just that's the practical thing to do at the time. And but he ends up being killed. But I think those soldiers around him made everybody realize he's part of this general withdrawal, and that's how he gets shot in the back. It's not because of anything with cowardice or anything. One of those things you don't want to be associated with as a soldier. Nothing against his honor.
I wonder how many times Cross went from red to black.
That's a good question.
It's like I always think maybe his red one was getting dirty and he had to, and so he had this black one and he put it on, and it just so happened that he died at this one, but he did it like 25 more times prior to this battle.
Or maybe the red one was in the sun so much it turned pink, and he didn't want that.
Right.
So let me switch this.
Right.
I'm
just
clearly
black.
aging. Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe he was cold and he thought the black would. I don't know. But there's still more. What did
It took 10 minutes to answer that question.
What did Father Corby tell the Irish Brigade before they went to battle that day? Go ahead.
He gathered them up and said, if you boys don't do well, you're going to hell.
That's right.
Yeah.
Catholic guilt.
No. He lines them up and he says, instead of taking each individual, and he gets permission from Hancock, and he's doing this for the Irish Brigade under Patrick Kelly, who's part of Caldwell's division. Instead of each individual having to confess and to get an absolution that way, he's granting general absolution. He does tell them to do their duty, protect the flag. It reminds me, I've got mixed feelings about all that. Not that, I don't want to start the Ernest Angley Power Hour on Sunday morning, but you ever heard of the song Sky Pilot by the Animals?
No.
Great song. It's probably my favorite Animal song. Eric Burdon and the Animals.
Yeah.
Sky Pilot. Look it up. But it's about these I think it's World War II military chaplains to tell the men to line up, do the good job, go out there, and what are they going to do? They're going to die. And where's the chaplain? He's waiting for the survivors to come back to console them. So it just reminds me of that. This is man's work. This ain't God's work. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? But I understand they're following their religious practices, but this stuff we're doing here, shooting and killing, that's man's work.
Yeah, God doesn't want that.
God doesn't have anything to do with it at this point.
He wants all his children to get along.
Yeah, but it's a good story. There's a statue there on coming up, headed towards the Pennsylvania Monument. There's after the war, William Corby becomes president of Notre Dame University. There's a replica of that monument at Notre Dame. Supposedly that's the rock he was on. I don't know. Because how did the rock get right next to the road then? I mean, geez.
Yeah. That's so convenient.
But he does stop them, and all this maelstrom's going on, the confusion, and they take time out to give a little speech to him, grant absolution, because it was important to some of them. Maybe it does give them a little bit more peace of mind, and they are able to fight without this burden on their back.
Now, I haven't heard this in decades, and I only heard it once, so I don't know if this is true, but I want to know for my own knowledge or whatever. I remember being on a tour with a license guide back in the early 2000s, late 90s, and the guide said that the reason that Notre Dame is called the Fighting Irish is because of Corby's connection to the Irish Brigade. Have you heard this before?
No, I haven't.
And I also heard the story that he told was that it was before a football game that Corby went and said a prayer for the team to win and bestowed the name upon the team. And now you are the Fighting Irish. Have you heard that?
I haven't heard it.
That's what I heard. I never heard it again.
Wow.
So I don't know how true that is.
True. I don't know.
Probably not true.
I just know Newt Rockney, Ronald Reagan.
What?
He was in the movie.
Oh.
Patrick O'Brien.
Right.
Never mind me.
What is the story behind the monument to the 3 New York regiments, the Irish Brigade Monument?
The Irish Brigade Monument. Beautiful monument. It's interesting. There's 2 other regiments in the Irish Brigade here at Gettysburg. Mm-hmm. So, but this one is dedicated to the New York regiments within that brigade, 63rd, 69th, and 88th New York. It also, on one of the ends of it, has a little bas relief thing for the artillery unit that used to be attached to them.
That's right.
Patrick Rorty. R-O-R-T-Y. Yeah. And his battery is going to be up with, I believe it's north of the copse of trees along Hancock Avenue on during the fight. But so they're not attached to the Irish Brigade after the beginning. So it's dedicated to those soldiers. It has the Irish Wolfhound on the front of it.
Why?
The Irish Wolfhound, it's Irish, but it represents faith and devotion. Now, there's a thing there on one of the ends that says this is the Irish Wolfhound, and it's been extinct for over 100 years. But
right, I just saw him walking down the street the other day.
Earlier this summer, I saw these 2 giant Shetland ponies from a distance, and I get up, they're 2 Irish Wolfhounds, and I said, "My God, these things are huge."
Yeah,
but so they're not extinct.
No,
no,
isn't it a certain breed of Irish Wolfhound or a certain what do you call it? sub-breed?
Yeah, it could be. But it looks nice, and so it's dedicated to them. The curious fact about that monument is a former Confederate soldier was the sculptor. His name is William Rudolph O'Donovan. So O'Donovan is clearly Irish.
Yes.
He was here at Gettysburg. He's in an artillery unit with Ewell's Corps. I believe it's Ewell's Corps. So he was here, but afterwards he becomes this, I don't know if he's famous, but he's a known in that sculpting world sculptor. And that's who they get to design that monument. It's a beautiful monument.
Interesting.
I mean, it's got nice color and everything. But
yeah, no, it's very nice.
Yeah.
It's a very popular monument.
And that's that area, the south end of Stony Hill, where the Irish Brigade sets up. So,
who was Z. Boylston Adams?
can Mike tell me what the first name is?
Zebulon.
No.
Zelda.
No, that would be cool if it was.
Zeldo.
No.
Zeke. Mike doesn't say that. He just puts in the Z.
I can't even pronounce
Eric,
it.
do you know it?
Oh, God.
I heard you say no.
It's like...
Can I say it? I can't even say it because I can't pronounce it.
Zebdiel.
Yeah, Zebdiel, something like that.
There you go.
Zebdiel.
There you go.
But he was a surgeon with 32nd Massachusetts. And so directly across the road from the Irish Monument, there's a large rock, and then there's an open area behind the rock, and there's a flat rock in this little cove. And in one of those big rocks, you'll see a plaque for Zebdiel. And so he was a surgeon. He moved the field station close to the regiment, and he took care of soldiers right there in that alcove. And you've got protection, sort of, all the front lines right there, but you've got this other flat rock where you can do rudimentary medical procedures before you get men off the field. And what that did was it provided a lot of those wounded soldiers with immediate medical care that ordinarily they would have had to wait on or try to get themselves off the field. So that saved a lot of lives. Now, after everything gets pushed out of there and they go back to their respective field hospitals, he works like a dog. And it says, he stayed up like 2 days and 3 nights without any sleep. And now I've stayed up 36 hours and I felt like I was run over by a train. But he stayed up so long, he develops blindness, which if you're a surgeon, it's sort of important.
Yeah.
But because of this, and I don't, I'm not medically astute. I don't know if that's a natural cause of staying up this length of time. But because of that, they discharged him from the Army. And so that ends his military medical career. But it doesn't end his military career because later on he's going to come back as an infantryman. He wants to still be in the war fighting for the cause. He's going to join up with another Massachusetts regiment and fight. I think he gets wounded. I think he comes back and signs up with another unit, but he stays on. But after the war, he goes back to medical practice and becomes like a family physician or something.
Oh.
So he's an interesting guy.
Yeah. A lot of interesting people in the war.
That's what makes it fascinating.
Yeah. I guess there's just a lot of interesting people in the world at any given time, right?
Yeah. Exactly right.
Outside of a massive obelisk on Cemetery Ridge, there are no ornate statues or monuments to the U.S. Regulars Regiment at Gettysburg, or U.S. Regular Regiments at Gettysburg. Why is that?
Is this Mike still?
This is still Mike. We have 42 more questions to go, and then we're on to the next person.
Because if you think about it, all the lovely monuments are volunteer regiments. They volunteered to fight for their states. They're fulfilling the state quota. So afterwards, those regimental associations would solicit private donations, and they'd get a nice chunk of money from their various states. What state had a lot of money? New York. You got a lot of big New York monuments.
Oh, sure.
But regulars were in the Army to be soldiers. They came from all over, and they're in the Army. Who's their patron saint? The U.S. government. So they're going to get what the U.S. government gives them.
Right.
And that monument is a lovely monument. It's just one. But if you're standing on Little Round Top looking towards the west, you see the tree line on Hawks Ridge, and there's a road right there. You can see some monuments there.
Yeah.
They all look the same.
Yeah, tablets.
Yeah, tablets. But they're for those Union regular regiments. So they do have each one of them has a tablet. They're all the same, though, because it's the government. The U.S.
Right.
government, when it pertains to the military, loves uniformity.
Right, sure.
So, and this is the money you're going to get. This is the design you're going to get. Take it or leave it.
So much so that at quick glance, you can confuse those with division tablets
yeah.
But they're not. They're regiments.
Yeah. Their overall monument, I think, is lovely.
The obelisk, yeah.
Yeah,
it's
and you're
one of my
pointing, you're on
favorites.
West Confederate. You say, hey, see the Washington Monument over there? Look
Yeah.
to the little left, the big clump of trees? Yeah. So
That they're repairing that now.
they are. They've taken,
Yeah.
you know, I've watched it as I've taken bike tours up there. I look at it every Sunday, how the blocks are moving around. And that's quite a chore to keep track of every block where it went to. And it's
It's-
like when they did the Oak Hill.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how they take that apart. Because
Yeah.
it's when when it's all together, you look at it and you go, "How do you take this apart?"
Yeah.
But without destroying it.
Yeah.
And
One
they have a
stone
way to
at a
do
time.
it. Yeah, one stone at a time. Exactly.
Amazing.
Okay, then let's see. Okay, we've got. Okay, this is his
We
last
still with
one.
Mike?
We're still with Mike.
Good old Mike.
This is his last one, forever. Okay, he's now banned from asking any questions.
you know
No,
what?
I'm just
Let me say this.
I'm just
Mike
joking.
is a very smart, astute fellow. He knows his stuff.
Yeah, he
I give him
does.
that. He is.
He really does. I mean, he really knows his stuff.
Yeah.
He's like, he reads like a new book a week. I'm like, how do you do that?
He's
Where do you
better than
find the
me.
time?
I'm just trying to get 50 a year, and I can never make it past 30.
I'd be happy if I read one book in the last year.
Oh,
know.
he sleeps with them under his pillow, and
I think he does, and it just osmosis.
yeah, it must be because that guy knows some
He
stuff.
does, and he asks these great questions that show that he has a real depth of knowledge. Like down to people, and that's what this next question is: who was Henry Merwin? Let's do these rapid fire because there's like 60 people in this one question. Who was Henry Merwin?
He was the commander of the 27th Kinetic, part of Caldwell's division.
Who was Henry Fuller?
64th New York.
Who was Charles Taylor?
13th Pennsylvania Regiment, also known as the 42nd Pennsylvania Original Bucktails. Pretty good, Eric?
Oh, yeah.
Also known as 1st Pennsylvania Rifles.
Also, Kane's Rifles.
There we go.
Who was Jedediah Chapman?
He was a member of the 27th Connecticut. He has an interesting story.
What's the story?
So, 27th Connecticut shows up here with approximately 75 men.
Uh-huh.
They are a 9-month regiment. They are supposed to muster out in about 3 weeks from this time this battle takes place. So, Eric would understand it. They're short timers. Today's short timers don't do nothing. They go and hide and watch
Hell
TV.
no.
Yeah. These short timers are here at Gettysburg going across the Wheatfield. Now, the reason there's only 75 because most of the regiment is captured at Chancellorsville. During that battle, Jedediah Chapman, most of his company is captured, but I think he was sick. He wasn't with them to get captured.
Okay.
He comes back and rejoins the regiment, and he gets killed in the Wheatfield. If he's not sick, he's with his unit at Chancellorsville, he probably gets captured. That's not to say he won't die in a prison camp
Right.
or subsequent
But he
battle.
doesn't die here.
He doesn't die here.
But he
so, to me,
doesn't.
that's interesting.
That is interesting.
And there's a marker.
So what do they all have in common? I think you kind of answered
There's
it
a
right
marker
there.
for each one of those. Henry Merwin is along Wheatfield Road. If you come down, you pass the sign that says Wheatfield. It's a little bit further down on the right.
Isn't there an obelisk? Is it an obelisk? Near
That's
an
Zook.
obelisk.
Zook.
Oh, that's
Zook
Zook.
is-
Yeah, that's the first one you come to. It's on
Right.
a rock on the
Okay.
corner. But the Merwin marker was originally where the 27th monument
right.
is in the middle of the field. They put
Yes.
the monument up and they moved that out there. Go into the Wheatfield when you're by the wayside. If you come down, I think that's one way. So you'd have to go along Brook Avenue and come down to Trobriand Avenue. But Jedediah Chapman's marker's there. It looks like a little gravestone. Henry Fuller, we visited that last.
Yes.
Was it last?
It was
2 years ago.
2020.
Yeah, we wandered around.
Yeah,
like
last spring. Yeah.
Well, me and him, I come up every New Year's Eve and just wander the woods by myself.
Yes.
And he joined me 2 years ago.
Oh, that was 20. Yeah, that was 2020.
And
New Year's Day.
So if you're back there in Rose's Woods, there's the old trolley path.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you're going towards the east, southeast, take a left off there, and you can get down in the woods and find the Fuller marker. And then
we ended up doing that like live streamed
Remember
Get
that
Out of
first
the
Get Out of the Car tour that we live
Yeah,
streamed?
yeah.
And we went down to the full
that's right.
marker too.
And then
We got stopped by law enforcement because Eric had a very professional-looking cell phone on
that's
a broom
right.
handle.
It's a rake
that
handle
same
with
lady. Yeah. She actually showed up
cell
2 weeks
phone.
ago. A little girl crashed on her bike, and I was thankful to see her because she immediately pulled up. Where'd you come from?
Well,
she's following me.
She's following you.
But
she remembers
I
you.
appreciate it because she's checking on the poor little girl. It was wet conditions. So, what was the other marker?
Taylor.
Charles Taylor, not of Liberia. His marker is near where the 13th Pennsylvania reserves are. So it's to the east of the 5th New Hampshire, back in those woods. So
okay.
each one of these individuals.
It's right on Ayers Avenue. So when you first turn onto Ayers Avenue, it's straight. You get to the 148th PA's monument will be on your right-hand side, and you make that first left turn into the woods.
Yeah.
It's right there on your left.
Oh, yeah.
So each one of these individuals has a marker where they were.
So what are these experiences that they have indicate about what it was like to be an officer in the Wheatfield? Or do you think it had anything to do with that?
Probably not very good for your life expectancy.
Yeah, not good for your life expectancy.
But it's not that the Confederates were
they're not on
targeting
horses.
officers. No.
It's different than if you're on a horse, you're definitely a target. I think it's just the overall maelstrom of this fight, and they're shooting at people. Now, maybe they see them because they got their sword out and they're, trying to lead their men. And if Confederates have the wherewithal to say he looks important,
right?
You could target him that way. But I'm
there's
not
so
sure.
many bullets flying all over the place.
And
I know Taylor is out front of his line when he's killed.
Yeah,
he was asking for it.
He's like 25 or 30 yards in advance of his.
So he's clearly a target.
He's
but
killed.
Now Cross is on a horse. I think Cross is on a horse.
I think so.
And so a guy behind the rocks, he's a guy on a horse. Yeah, he looks important. I'm going to take him out.
Why
not? But you look at the Confederate side. They're losing just as many regimental commanders and captains and lieutenants too. So it's just a matter of you're all there and you're going to get shot. There's so many bullets, like you said. So.
Well, that was good. That ends the Mike Lentz portion of the show.
Time for another break, huh?
And we'll be right back. Man.
Thanks, Mike. I do appreciate
all
it.
possible information.
Yeah, Mike really does want all possible information. All right, next, moving on here. Zach Anders. I frequently hear guides discuss how many times the Wheatfield exchanged hands excuse me, let me take that again. I'm going to just, oh no, I can't because of the video.
Oops.
Oh, well, the video gets to be, it's the behind-the-scenes thing.
Radio insider.
Yes. Zach Anders says, I frequently hear guides discuss how many times the Wheatfield exchanged possession. See, because he wrote exchanges possession, and that threw me off. Exchanged possession during the battle. I imagine opinions vary on how one defines the Wheatfield and how one defines possession. How does Lewis break down the possession exchanges of the Wheatfield on
Lewis
July
just breaks
2nd?
down. I start to cry.
He breaks down when he starts to read this stuff.
I think of the Wheatfield fight as phases. There's only 2 times that the Confederates actually set foot into the Wheatfield. I mentioned during the narrative that the Anderson's men pushed the 17th Maine together with Sims coming in on the right. They pushed the 17th Maine off of that wall. 17th Maine falls back. When they do that, Anderson's men come on the other side of the wall. They're north of the wall, and they're starting to push into the Wheatfield. But then they're going to get pushed back. So that's one. And then the second time is when Wofford joins the fight, and they overwhelm the Union forces left there, and they come through and they occupy, and they go all the way to Hawks Ridge. So, and then they get pushed back.
There's more between those, isn't there? Back and forths.
Actually getting into the Wheatfield?
Well, I mean,
I think it's around the perimeter.
Pushing someone back and then.
I think it's Union. I think it's Confederates pushing Union folks off of Stony Hill.
Yeah.
Back and maybe off of the southern portion, but they never really go into the field itself. They're just pushing them back.
Right, but so they'll push back the Union line, and then the Union troops bring more in, and then push the Confederate, or at least hold the Confederates.
There's a critical question in there that you have to answer. How do you define possession?
Well, the way you were saying before,
like, tactical possession is like I am in uncontested control of this piece of ground.
Yeah.
And I'm with Lewis. I think there's really only one, maybe two times when Confederates actually have possession of the Wheatfield. And that's, in my opinion, it's right there at the end.
Yeah, that's once. And even when Anderson's men get into the Wheatfield, that's a tenuous. They're just there because they pushed the 17th Maine back, but they're
contesting possession of it.
Yeah, but they don't control
think they
it.
actually have it.
No.
When so then when guides say that it changes hands 6 times or 7 times or 200 times or whatever the number is that they say, the implication is possession. But in reality, it always reminded me when I would hear people talk about it or read about it or whatever. It always reminded me of, you ever see when like the ocean comes in on the shore and then the water rushes back out and then there's that wave that goes against the waves coming in.
Yeah.
Do you ever notice that?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what it reminds me of. It's just this back and forth, like a seesawing kind of pendulum type of thing.
If
it's
it helps,
back and forth.
You just look at these maps that we've been referencing.
Yes.
And see how many times that gray line goes into that open space.
Yeah.
Not that these maps are the end-all, be-all, but they give a good illustration of the back and forth. And I call it phases. First phase, you have Anderson going against the 17th Maine. The second phase, Tilton and Schweitzer arrive, and they occupy Stony Hill. Third phase, Kershaw attacks. Tilton and Schweitzer get out of the area, but Kershaw doesn't go any further than Stony Hill.
Right.
He doesn't go east of it. The next phase, 17th Maine is pushed off the wall. That's when Anderson's men go into the field partly. They don't go clear across to the Wheatfield Road. Then you have the next phase, Caldwell's men, his division comes down and sweeps the Wheatfield. They get pressured. Then you have the next phase. They start to retreat. That's when Schweitzer re-enters the Wheatfield and comes down there where I explained where the 4th Michigan's fighting. The next phase, then you have Wofford's division or brigade has joined the attack, and this is when it's going to sweep all the way over to Hawks Ridge. I skipped a part. As they're starting to do this, you have the next phase, the regulars enter the field. Then the regulars are pushed back. Then you have the Confederates going all the way to Hawks Ridge. And then you have the final phase when the reserves come down and push the Confederates back towards the Stony Hill. And they set up shop on the Hawks Ridge, and you have that open space with all the wounded. So I look at it as phases rather than... It doesn't exchange hands. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
Except for the time Eric and I have spoke about it. Yeah. So I look at it as phases, and maybe it's just a case of different verbiage people use in trying to describe it. But like I pointed out to you just now, not that these are end all be all, but look at these maps from the Liano maps. How many times did the gray lines represent the Confederate regiments enter that white space known as the Wheatfield, and either go either way? Not that often.
Not very, yeah,
it's
and they
more
didn't get very far either.
Yeah, it's more the dark color coming and going, and then you have these little dots where they're all mixed up. But it's the dark, and that's the Union forces. They're just trying to hold this line, and they do a great job.
Sure,
considering all the time that goes by and how many Confederates are thrown at them, but. It doesn't.
But Lewis, what if Hood would have been able to go around to the right?
Oh, just went around to the right. He got his butt whipped there too.
Now that question there that Zach asked, in the answer we kind of answered Chaplain Cox's question. It has been often said that the Wheatfield changed hands 6 times during the afternoon. The only times I've seen where a Confederate unit actually possessed the Wheatfield is after Wofford's assault. Yep. If, in fact, it changed hands 6 times, describe which specific Confederate units had total possession of the field, and you kind of did that.
Let's just be a lesson to Mike Lentz. This is called a 2-for-1 question. 2 questions, 1 answer. And so he could have taken his 10 questions. Each one's a 2-for-1.
Right.
In reality, 5 questions, which is less than 6 questions.
You know what's funny is Mike used to work in radio.
Did he?
And I'm surprised he can't, pith it up,
What did he do in radio?
I think he was on air.
Really?
If I'm not mistaken. I'd have to ask him again. I forgot what he told me. He used to work in radio.
Wow.
Yeah.
People are interesting.
Yeah. Mike's got a very interesting career. He was in politics. He was in radio. Yeah, he was a very interesting guy. But anyway, so, you would think that he would know that you can't, do 10 questions each that have 4 parts. That's 40 questions.
Yeah.
But that's okay. This is a podcast. It's a long form, so that's all right. Ethan Gallo, he asks, how much more disciplined were regular Army soldiers in their drill, physical appearance, and the conduct while in combat compared to volunteers?
They were soldiers. They start their military career being trained versus. So the answer is probably a lot, especially with, I mentioned the 27th Connecticut's a 9-month regiment that they sign up and they have 9 months to be trained and they're going to fight in at least 2 big battles, Chancellorsville and Gettysburg. Whereas regulars, I tell people on tours, they're soldiers who signed up to be soldiers. When this is over, they're not going back to be teachers or teach at Bowdoin College or be farmers or mechanics. After the war, they're going to be soldiers for as long as the government will have them. And that's their career. So naturally, they're going to be trained a lot more. They're going to have more discipline across the board.
They're going to look like soldiers.
They're going to look. They have a bearing because that's what their life is now.
Yeah, I can always tell like a person who's in the service by the way they walk, the way they carry themselves, and then when they speak, the way they speak.
I had a bike tour about 2 weeks ago. There was a gentleman who had a couple different families, and I looked at this one guy. I said, "You ever in the military?" And he says, "Yeah, Air Force." And this other guy said, "How did you know that?" And I said, "I'm a mind reader." And I said, "No, he has a certain bearing about him," and I could just tell. But it's just the nature of things. They signed up to be soldiers, and they were probably signed up in many cases before the war started. And this is their profession versus being a teacher, farmer, or mechanic. It just makes
studying
sense.
Soldiering.
Yeah, it just makes sense.
Mike Rengert. Hey guys, I've always been a fan of Brigadier General Charles Griffin, who had commanded the 1st Division of the 5th Corps until after the Battle of Chancellorsville when he took sick and At Gettysburg, Barnes found himself temporarily leading a division despite having limited combat experience. He commanded Tilton, Schweitzer, and Vincent's brigades. We know what happened to Vincent's brigade, but how would you assess Barnes and the other 2 brigades' performance during the battle and in the Wheatfield? As far as I'm aware, Gettysburg may be the last time Barnes held a combat command? ?
Yes, very true. Barnes, let's start from the end and work back. That's such a long question. Barnes gets slightly wounded here at Gettysburg, so he's pulled from the field. Not pulled from the field, but he leaves the command. He's no longer in command of that division when this is all said and done. And he doesn't have field command again during the war. He stays in the military, but he's in charge of a garrison somewhere, probably down in D.C. Barnes is an old guy. He's old in terms of age back then. He was a graduate of West Point with Robert E. Lee in 1829. I think he graduated 5th, so he's not a dummy. But like I mentioned earlier, like Burling's brigade, Barnes's division is piecemealed out. I mean, an aide finds Vincent. We know that story. His one flaw is, I think he tells, like I mentioned during the narrative again, he tells Tilton, if it gets too hot, use your judgment, you can fall back. It gets too hot pretty quick for Tilton. So Tilton's brigade, they shouldn't get high marks, really. And that's based on his leadership.
Right.
Because they don't want to
get high marks.
He shouldn't get high marks because those men don't want to leave. Schweitzer pulls his men out also because Tilton's leaving. But Schweitzer doesn't go very far. Schweitzer just goes north on the north portion of the Wheatfield Road at the edge of the Trossel Woods. And like I mentioned earlier, Schweitzer's 3 regiments come back. And one of those regiments is the 4th Michigan. So they come back into the Wheatfield. They don't go very far. So he does a pretty good job as far as leadership goes, in my opinion. But Tilton gets low marks. His men get high marks. Other than telling Tilton, if things get too hot, pull out, Barnes doesn't do much. I mean, he's just his little division's getting piecemealed out, and he gets slightly wounded and pulled from the field, and it's the last we hear of him. So I don't know. I'm sort of ambivalent to him.
Okay, that's a good answer.
Thank you.
All right, this guy told me how to pronounce that. I've been mispronouncing his name for over a year now. And we finally met face to face, and he spoke it for me.
And you forgot.
I've already forgotten. But I think I have it here. Brian Duranick. Duranick. Wait, how did I normally say it? Duranick. Duranick is how I normally said it, and then he said no, it's more Duranick. So, or Duranick. Either way, Brian D wants to know, I have a question for the episode with Lewis. One, he's got two, actually. One, can you talk about the strategic significance of, God damn it.
Of the Wheatfield?
Are we talking about that?
Are we talking about the Wheatfield? Yeah. Can you talk about the strategic significance the control of the Wheatfield had as compared to other portions of the battlefield in determining the outcome of the fighting on July 2nd?
I don't think it has any. Big picture, it doesn't, because what's the Confederate objective? Cemetery Hill.
Cemetery Hill.
Despite Jeff Daniels not being there, that is the objective. You're, mile and a half, 2 miles from the objective, and that occupying the Wheatfield doesn't bring you any closer to achieving your objective from the Confederate point of view. Therefore, this isn't his question, but therefore I consider that action a loss rather than a draw for the Confederates. They've expended so much men and blood, lost so many key commanders fighting there and Devil's Den, that so much energy expelled there, and you're no closer than you were at the start of the day. You're in a minus situation now than you were at the start of the day, achieving your objective, which is Cemetery Hill. And by that means alone, to me, it's a Confederate loss. Tactically, I hate to say it, because all the men who died there, it's useless ground. Mm-hmm. It doesn't provide an advantage for either army. That area, like I mentioned at the very beginning, is fought over because a portion of Sickle's line is down in that area.
Right.
And that drew the Confederates further to the south when they set up their initial line. And when they attack, they're attacking those men.
Because if you're looking from the Confederate lines, you cannot see the Wheatfield. So it's not that someone said, everybody converge on the Wheatfield. But if you're looking at the way the battle played out, where the Wheatfield is kind of just this natural convergence point for Hood's men and at least Wofford's brigade, or, some of, so like everybody just kind of meets there. And also it's a wide open field. You're going to it's easier to move through there and everything like that. But there's and the only reason why, this is the other thing I wanted to say earlier on, is that we call this the Wheatfield, but there's hundreds of Wheatfields in Gettysburg during the battle. This is the only one that's
is
really special. Yeah.
I think, Law's brigade attacks, and they're going due east, pushing sharpshooters back, and they get up onto the western slopes of Big Round Top, and then they're ordered to. Law wants to stay there. I think it's Law, or one of the regimental commanders just wants to stay there and turn that into Gibraltar. But now you're told, go attack that hill, Little Round Top, because it's there. So, but you got these guns over here, and he sends a couple of his regiments. He pulls them from the right, moves them around to attack Smith's guns. And that's when Robertson's brigade's coming up. He's attacking Devil's Den, where those guns are, but now he's starting to get fire from his left. And what is that? That's the 17th Maine. So that's why you have part of the 1st Texas and 3rd Arkansas firing over there. So what does that mean for Robertson? He needs support on his left. And you bring up Anderson's brigade, and now things are rolling into the Wheatfield. It just rolls up the line because you're getting fire. To me, on the Confederate side, you keep getting fire to your left.
Right.
So you bring in more units to your left, and that brings into the Wheatfield.
To the Wheatfield, yeah. How big was the 17th Maine? Because I'm looking, in the Llano maps, and were they stretched thin, or were they a large unit? Because it looks like they're covering a good portion of that wall.
They are, but they don't cover the whole wall.
No, but a good portion of it.
Yeah.
And at certain points on the map, it looks like they're fighting against 2 regiments.
Let me find Detroit Brand. I like to give numbers aren't my thing.
Yeah.
It's the whole math thing. Even though this isn't math, but it's
Well, and still, it's hard to be sure of what the numbers actually
let's
were.
see,
Like they're
17th
like
Maine?
400.
350.
350?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're about average.
And they suffer approximately 38% casualty rate. So they do their fair amount of fighting. Now, let me go back to, I mentioned, and this wasn't a question from anybody, but I mentioned how many men the 27th Connecticut had, approximately 75. So, but they're not the only ones that are way down on their numbers. Let's go to, where is the Irish Brigade?
There's no time.
63rd New York, 75 men. 69th New York, 75 men. 88th New York, 90 men. 116th Pennsylvania, 66 men.
Well, the whole Irish Brigade is only about, 550 men?
It's less than that. Let me go back here. I just lost my page.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard 550, 600-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's another the 28th Mass is included at that point, I
Right.
think.
In that number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. About 500.
500,
Yeah, you're right.
That's a brigade.
Yeah, brigade. Where, you look at
The whole brigade.
so on the other end of the field, the 26th North Carolina.
Yeah, 800.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but they've been just decimated. They've done heavy fighting up to this point. So,
All right.
so yeah.
All right.
I think we got way off track. But I
That's
hope
okay.
all
That's
it-
fine. That's
all of
fine.
it
That's
helps.
fine. Okay. The second question of his.
That's right. He had more than one. He's
Brian.
doing the Michael Lentz thing.
Everybody tries to be 6-question lengths, but no one comes close.
Oh no! And now they got a higher bar after this
I know.
episode.
Now he's up to 10 questions. Of all the units which participated in the back and forth fighting in the Wheatfield, did any stand out for being most affecting the outcome on this portion of the battlefield? Do any of them stand out to you,
I know
Lewis?
the answer.
Go ahead.
I think I would pick the 17th Maine
A good one.
because they hold that wall
Yeah.
in the beginning. And then when they fall back, they just don't leave. They stop
They
again.
stop, yeah.
And they're falling back because they're running out of ammunition. Matter of fact, they capture a regimental color guard flag bearer for one of the Confederates. And they send him back there. They're behind their lines. They're going to send him to the rear. And they tell, members of the 17th Maine tell the soldiers escorting this fellow back to the rear, send some ammunition back too. So while they're taking the flag bearer back, they're requesting ammunition at the same time, and they get more ammunition. That allows them to stop midway through that field again and turn around. And because if they fall all the way back, and like I mentioned earlier, Anderson comes across the wall
Right.
into the Wheatfield. Winslow's battery's there.
Right.
Maybe they get to that battery. I don't know. Because Winslow's able to get his guns off the field. But to me, that's the one that initially holds that wall. If they're not there initially, that Confederates get through there quicker. But then they stop and they delay Anderson's men just enough that, to me, it helps their cause greatly.
Sure. Okay.
But it's out of all those regiments, it's really hard.
It's hard to tell.
Eric, what was
yours?
Oh, anybody watching the video knows.
Well, I'm not.
Well, we're not watching the goddamn video. And nobody's going to
It's
be
the
watching
reserves. Come on, they end it.
Yeah, come on.
Oh, Wiley Crawford. Samuel Wiley. He's an interesting guy. He's also at Fort Sumter when the battle opens with Doubleday.
He's a doctor.
He's a
He was the
surgeon.
garrison
Yeah.
surgeon,
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about that?
I didn't know that.
And at Gettysburg, he tries to be the flag bearer.
Yeah. He doesn't know what he wants to do.
He's going to find a niche sooner or later in life.
He takes that poor kid from the 1st Reserves with him.
You ain't getting my flag.
All right, Joe Jacobs. Why did Meade mainly reinforce the Wheatfield sector of Sickle's advanced position and not the rest? I know a few regiments from the 2nd Corps went to Humphrey's right. However, most of the 3 divisions went to the Wheatfield sector. Any idea why?
Meade's just trying to hold on.
Yeah.
I mean, so much confusion arises from Sickles moving out. And he tells Sickles, you can draw from these other areas. It happens to be that the left portion of his line is the weakest, and that's where they need men.
Right.
And Sickles is drawing from other areas.
It's also Humphreys is not in danger at the same time that the Wheatfield is.
And a couple of regiments go out there from Hancock's line to try to bolster.
Humphreys.
Yeah, then Wright overruns him. But, I don't think he's doing anything on Meade. I don't think Meade's saying, we need to hold the Wheatfield. He's trying to hold the line.
Right. And the line has a hole in the Wheatfield.
Yeah. So I don't think, Meade is reacting to what Sickles has done the best way he can. It's like a fire hose with him. He's got all kinds of stuff going on. So, I don't think it's a case where he says, well, we're going to hold this because this has immense strategic value and we're going to pour everything we can in there. I think it plays out that Sickles is drawing from the areas he's been told to draw from as long as he's in charge, and that fight's down there developing. So
he's stopping the bleeding.
Yeah,
is what he's doing.
Yeah,
and
the one mistake he makes, Meade, is allowing so many men to be pulled off Culp's Hill.
Yeah,
and it works out in the end,
right?
But if this
he
gets
wanted
in the
to take
weed,
them all off at first.
Yeah, but if the Stonewall Brigade's not out on Brinkerhoff's Ridge goofing off, but if they're with Johnson's and you put them down to the left behind George Stewart or next to him, you've got more of a force, and everything else plays out the same way, they can probably get to the Baltimore Pike because they got more men.
Right.
So
that's just the way it works out.
Yeah.
Balthazar, he has two questions. Why was Brooks' brigade not better supported by the rest of Caldwell's division once they made that much of a success driving the Confederates temporarily out of the Wheatfield? Also, are the monument markings accurate to the success of the brigade?
Brooks' brigade, I assume.
Brooks' brigade.
Yeah. I assume they were. They talk about getting up to a ledge, and they get within pistol shot range of the Georgians. So I think they're pretty accurate. They're up. If you walk back in those woods, you come up to that ridge, and then it flattens out where the Brooks Avenue is, and then across the road you see Rose's Fields. I think Brooks' brigade sweeps through there so effectively. They maneuver the support from the other regiments on either side of them. They get out in front, and there's immense pressure coming down on Kelly and Zook because Semmes is joined in with Kershaw. By now, Barksdale has probably broken the line up there at the Peach Orchard, and so that all that artillery's gone, and Kershaw doesn't have to worry about artillery to his left. So Brooke just pushes so far through, the Confederates are able to flank him on either side. So I don't think it's a matter of why aren't these other brigades supporting you? I think it's you've outrun your support, and they've got problems of their own.
Yeah.
So
they're just stuck. They can't support them.
Yeah.
Brooks' Brigade, my ex-girlfriend's ancestor was in the 53rd Pennsylvania.
Oh, that's cool.
And if you ladies and gentlemen would Google the Anthony J. Beaver letters online, that's him.
Wow.
And he's put some pretty cool letters there about the Battle of Gettysburg and other parts of the war as well. How did the Wheatfield fight connect to the fighting of Devil's Den and Little Round Top? When we went over this, kind of, didn't we?
Yeah,
already?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, so Rich Snyder, he's next. Were the wounded Union soldiers from the area of the Wheatfield taken to the George Spangler Farm Field Hospital? ?
I don't think so. I think there's a couple that go over there. I think there's a guy from the 17th Maine that gets buried over there. But by and large, no, because that's 11th Corps Hospital. So they would have been taken somewhere else. I know those commanders who die from wounds die at other farmhouses. They don't die over there at Spangler Farm. So,
well, there was wasn't the schoolhouse? Wasn't that a second
Granite
Corps?
Schoolhouse? Yeah.
That was a Second Corps hospital, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's across the road now.
Yeah.
So I differentiate that between that and the Spangler Farm. Same area, but it's a different location.
Right. Okay.
I might be wrong in that, but that's how I view it.
Right. No, yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, but they are. If you look at,
I think eventually the Second Corps Hospital moved back to the Spangler Farm.
Okay.
Isn't that what they said at the? Yeah.
I know in
they had to.
Ron Kirkwood's book, he has listings of soldiers buried over there and stuff, and I know there's at least one case where there's a 17th Maine soldier buried there, and there's somebody else from another regiment that was in the Wheatfield buried there.
Yeah.
Whether they went there and were treated for the wounds and died, and that's why they're buried, or they were just carried back there. I'm not sure about that. But
that is a good book, Too Much for Human Endurance.
It is.
Get that book if you want to know about
it's really good.
the Spangler Farm. Roy Mead. Hi, guys. My question for Lewis is, did the Wheatfield always have the same amount of respect for the fighting it has today, or was it a forgotten aspect of the battle that only received its due as years went by? It's a good question. Was it, the Wheatfield right away, or is that something that happened over time?
I don't know. So I'm not being a smart ass like I usually am, saying, I don't know. I know the soldiers who fought there, of course, took pride in where they fought. There's a lot of letters to John Batchelder about the area.
Yeah.
Like I say, when Kershaw writes his Battle and Leaders essay, it's about primarily the Wheatfield because that's where his soldiers fought and the artillery line up at the Peach Orchard. But I don't know if it's always been, what we think of it today. That's a good question. And if it had been, I don't know where it flips. Becomes something. It's sort of like
it's like the 20th Maine.
Yeah, and we know when that flips.
Right. I would imagine though that if you fought in the Wheatfield, with the amount of casualties that were there and with just the utter chaos that seemed to be there, you would be telling everybody.
Yeah, and it's like the account you read coming back from the break.
Yeah.
That guy's writing about the hogs, so that's an important thing to him.
Right.
And there are other Union regimental histories that's a big deal to them because they fought there. But as far as the public at large, I don't know. I mean,
when I look back at when I see old tourist maps or postcards or things from like the early 1900s or mid 1900s, there's Wheatfield stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if it wasn't a popular place, it wasn't very long that it wasn't popular.
I have to say, they made a point of running the electric trolley.
Yeah, the trolley line goes
through
Roadwood. So.
Right along the Wheatfield.
But
so
that's
got to be some kind of indicator.
It's a good point, Eric. That's point.
True. But is that a means just to get down to Devil's Den and all that?
That's a good point
I think
there.
Partially, but they also run that line along, what is that, Tawnytown Road, kind of parallel with the railroad spur line.
Yeah.
So if you look at a map of how the trolley ran, they didn't have to go that way.
No.
They did make a point of going that way.
That's it's good point again. I don't know.
So I got to come up with a good point.
No, you had one.
Point counterpoint. Yeah.
Yes.
New hit show.
So we each one. Eric's one ahead of you now.
We're gonna play Guess My Line.
I thought we were even, but all right.
No, you had one, and then he had another, and then you just made another,
okay.
and then.
I wonder.
Yes.
So we know, and people have mentioned it. They think it's the most confusing thing on earth, the fight there. I wonder if it's always been confusing to people from the get-go. You know what I mean?
It has to be.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't all be that dumb. It's just like everybody else got it, but suddenly we've hit the dumb generations.
Yeah.
Well, it's like
you
and I were talking about earlier. If you look at it from like a micro level, like individual regiments moving around, yeah, it absolutely is confusing.
Right.
But if you start to look at it at like a brigade and a special division level, it's much more simplified.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the bigger you go, the easier it is to understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
If you can keep track of all the comings and goings by brigade,
sure.
Yeah, it's not that hard.
Right. Brian from Cleveland. Other than Hancock, was there another general watching the field that was sending in reinforcements, or was it the brigade commander sending out messengers seeking help?
Other than Hancock sending Caldwell down there, I don't think he's paying attention because Hancock's moving brigades along his own line after Caldwell departs. So, like I said, Caldwell has a certain amount of control, and then Kershaw has a certain amount of control. I think brigades are hanging on as long as they can, or in the case of Tilton, he's hanging on as long as he wants to. And, there gets to be that point where Caldwell's up near Little Round Top. He's watching the action before the regulars go in. And so they're watching, for lack of a better word, from above. Right. And they see the action, and they're directing movements. Other than that, I think it's down to brigade level, the movements. It really is, because in at a certain point, it gets down to regimental movement, especially on the Confederate side when you have Anderson and Paul Semmes go down. These other people have to move up. You've just got regiments trying to work together.
Yeah.
So it becomes a very micro fight. So there's really no overall overarching command structure down there.
That's the big takeaway for me is that this is not a planned fight in the Wheatfield. The Wheatfield as a piece of ground prior to the fighting there was no attraction from either commander on either side at any level to the Wheatfield. We must hold the Wheatfield. That's something that Hollywood would say, but in reality, they stumbled into the Wheatfield, and this is where the fighting went.
Yeah. If you look at that and then compare it to later on, it is later on, but then I think the times overlap further up where the rest of Hancock's line is, how he's up there controlling things. He's moving Willard's brigade around and other brigades. He's sending the 1st Minnesota in. He is overall commanding all that up there. There's no such force or hand down in the Wheatfield for either side doing all this. You mentioned earlier Hood goes down, so there's no division commander down here. The only time you have somebody higher up, you have Longstreet. Longstreet is hanging out with Barksdale, trying to keep him on a leash, and then finally lets him go, and then we see Longstreet send word to Wolfer and pull him back.
And Law takes over for Hood, but
it takes him a while to figure out he's in charge.
Exactly. So there's a good amount of time where there is no Confederate division commander for Hood's division.
And that's a problem.
And then eventually Sickles goes down, but even before he goes down, is he really exercising the overall command that Hancock is of his sector?
I think he's doing damage control.
Yeah.
Because his line is getting smashed.
Right.
Yeah. So when he goes down, maybe it's addition by loss.
So it's really, at the most, you're going to have a division commander maybe having any kind of overview, or not overview, but just like an overreaching strategy for his sector, what he can see right in front of him.
Trying to control events.
But all they're really doing is trying to staunch the bleeding.
Yeah, and I don't think the Union Army has anything like that until Caldwell shows up.
Right.
And then, like I said, Kershaw's the other one. He can't work with Barksdale because Barksdale's not ready to go when he goes, but when he needs help on his right, he gets together with Paul Semmes and tries to get them to come up and support everything. So it's just a confusing, as far as command and control, confusing mess.
Yeah. All right. And finally, Phil Fucus, he has 2 questions. What portion of the fighting was hand-to-hand? Always very confusing when researching.
Definitely. And we mentioned it earlier when the 4th Maine is down there and Colonel Jeffords with the flag. That's hand-to-hand fighting. So that's one portion. For the most part, I don't think there is hand-to-hand fighting down there. No. They're shooting at each other, falling back shooting. You have the 1 artillery unit, so that's what kind of makes it not unique, but it's mainly an infantry fight. But they don't smash up against each other and do a lot of hand-to-hand. Like, the 17th Maine gets there, they have that wall. You're looking south, you go to the right of the wall, it becomes this marsh area where it's hard to get through. And then you have the Stony Hill on the western side of the Wheatfield, and that's pretty good defensive ground if you can hold it. But until the 17th Maine comes down, or 4th Michigan, comes down in there, and you have that hand-to-hand fighting, I really don't see any other accounts of widespread where it's notable hand-to-hand fighting.
Right.
You might have certain incidents throughout this afternoon and evening of it happening, but I think that's the one spot where the 4th Michigan's down there and Colonel Jeffords gets bayoneted.
And we've answered this question several times in several different ways, but I'll just ask it in case this is still an issue for Phil or anybody else listening. What was the strategic value of the Wheatfield? The duration of the fight indicates there must have been one, but it's not clear to me. And
the Union Army's just trying to hold on.
Right.
And the Confederates attack because that's how, like I explained, it sort of rolls to their left, and eventually the left goes from Devil's Den to the Wheatfield. For the Confederates, strategically, the Wheatfield does them no good. On the Union side, strategically, I don't think it does them much good either, other than the attrition they affect upon the Confederates. Because at the end of the day, they've got the higher ground, Little Round Top, and then that's when they formally establish what we call their fish hook position or upside down J or whatever. So it's not until after the fight on the second day that Mead's line is the way he wanted it to be in the first place. The Wheatfield is, it's overshadowed by Little Round Top up there. You can, have enough men up there shooting down in the Wheatfield. It's going to be hard to come from that direction up that hill. And like I mentioned earlier, it's a couple miles or a mile and a half probably, I never measured it, from their objective, which is Cemetery Hill.
Yeah.
That area gets attacked because that's where that line is. And it just, I think it, like I said earlier, it's a Confederate loss. It drains their manpower to the extent they can't afford, and it does them no good.
Right.
If the attacks continue to roll that ferociously up the line, and you get to Anderson's division under A.P. Hill, and they attack in depth, maybe you have a different outcome, but they don't, so we have what we have.
And it also inflicts some pretty high casualties on the Union side as well.
It does, but they can afford it.
They can afford it,
more.
yeah.
They've got the whole 6th Corps that's barely used.
Right.
I mean,
right.
Now they wore out. They have had a day, but once the battle starts and you get that adrenaline, Law's Brigade, Law's Brigade had walked, a marathon.
Yeah.
I ran one yesterday. I can barely walk. I have to crawl to my
20
car.
years old. You're not.
Oh, we had to go
You're
back to that.
62.
But yeah, it makes for a lot of interesting stories. It's a very heroic battle, I'd say, for both sides, what they're doing down there. But strategically, I view it as a Confederate loss. It doesn't do them any good. And the Union Army can afford that war of attrition in that area, where the Confederates certainly can't.
Right.
So,
all right. That is it for the questions, Lewis. We
no
have
more from
made
Mike
it.
Lentz.
No, Mike Lentz,
okay.
and he hasn't sent any last minute ones in. Thank God. Mike told me that he was out on a tour the other day, and it was one of was it Ralph Siegel, I think, was saying before.
Oh, yeah.
And they were doing a roll to see who had registered and who was there and everything, and they got to Mike, and then somebody said, from the radio show? So Mike's becoming quite a little celebrity there.
He goes on a lot of tours, too.
He does. Well, he moved out here to become a guide. And so he's studying very voraciously.
I think, just the small amount of times I get to talk to him.
Yeah.
I think he has the knowledge base.
Yeah.
The key is, can you tell the story?
You
gotta get rid of a lot of stuff when you tell the story.
I like listening to Mike talk about stuff. But yeah, I don't know. That's something that
you know the battle.
Yeah.
So he can go more in depth, and that's where you feel comfortable with.
But he goes like way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow.
You can't do that with Joe and Schmo from Iowa that have never been here.
I see where your point is.
Yeah.
I get you.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for Rob Abbott, I'm glad I get to say this publicly. Wasn't for Rob Abbott, I wouldn't be a guide, because he wore me out.
Good.
When I gave my my preparation for the oral exam, and I'd come up here and I'd worked all day, and he'd guided all day, and he gave up free time for me about 5:30 during the week in the evenings, and I'd go out and do these, facsimile car tours with him, and we get done. It's dark. We're parking up in the parking lot because it's in the fall. It's nighttime already, and I'd fill up a notebook of stuff I did wrong. Sometimes on the field, he's no, you don't. They don't understand that. But he was trying to drill it in my head. You have to stay way up in the clouds when you're giving people tours that don't know anything, because if you come down and get into the Mike Lentz level, you're going to confuse the mess out of them. And it took me a while, but I'll say it again. It wasn't for him, I wouldn't be a guy.
I have faith that Mike will. I think Mike needs to get down on that level for his own knowledge, and I think he's fully aware that he has to. I don't want to use the term dumb it down, but dumb it down for the public, and he'll get there when he gets there. But I think right now, I think he's the type that needs to learn it all, and then he can.
But you know what that gets him? Past the first hurdle, which is that test.
Which is the written exam.
That's a beast of a test.
Is it?
So, oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'll fail that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
But I think he could do it, though, with everything I know that he knows. He's well on his way.
Out of our little class of wannabe guides here, I think he'll pass it with no problem.
Yeah, he
knows all that stuff. Yeah.
He just doesn't know math. He's 6 questions. He comes up with 40. So he's got to work on that, too.
I know. We need to get him a math tutor. Yeah. That's all right. I needed one when I was growing up, too. Anyway, that's about it for us here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for submitting your questions. And
this was fun.
It was fun. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, that if you want to submit questions, you have to become a patron of patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. Patrons know everything that's going to happen long before you ever do. So if you want to be in the know and you want to, other things, there's other perks for being a patron. Go over there and give us a try at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. Thank you, Lewis, very much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you all for listening. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Turn those notifications on, and please consider becoming a patron, like I already said. That's patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
You should tape all that stuff in the end. You just push a button. You don't have to talk anymore.
You know, I think of that. But then I get lazy.
Our hearts so stout have got us fame, for soon 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man for debt shall go to jail from Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man for debt shall go to jail from Gary Owen in glory.
If it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's not a chicken.